So we are back for episode 23 of Broken by Concept, and today we have a very special guest, Jonathan Brown down the bottom here with his cheesy grin. This one I've been personally very excited for this one, and Nathan as well been talking a little bit about this one for a while. So for those of you who don't know, Jonathan Brown, we have a lot of history together. Jonathan Brown, he's an expert in stress. He's got his Worlds hoodie on right now. As you can see, he attended Worlds
2017 in China, in Wuhan, China.
That was the Wuhan Worlds.
It wasn't us, boys, was it? It wasn't us.
It was not us. I can attest.
Jonathan Brown, he also has his own book, Stress and Success. I've read that a few times. Excellent read. He's a family man. He is an expert with just high performance environments. He's a walking library, as you can see. His background there. He's
just a few
very
books.
Well read man. And for me and Nathan, he's been a very big mentor and a big part of the reason where we are today. And also, Jonathan has worked with Excel in the LEC and Fnatic. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. I believe it was Fnatic. You helped Fnatic at Worlds. Was it MSI or Worlds in 2018?
No, 2019, mate. When we did the reverse sweep.
Yes, the infamous reverse sweep. All right, so you have to give us a bit of an insight.
Best day.
Nice. So yeah, thanks for joining us today, Jonathan, and
thanks for the invite, boys.
It's gonna be a good one.
And awesome to be episode 23 in honor of Michael Jordan. That you brought me in. Michael Jordan of gaming, mate.
Michael Jordan of psychology. Cool. So, we're actually just thinking the other day, I was saying, how the hell did Jono get involved with us? Like, what the hell happened? How did Jono go from the business world, leadership, stress, trading, to League of Legends? So, walk us through, Jono. What happened? Why are we on this
I love
show?
this story. I love this story. We've got to share the story.
How do you know us?
So, I had end of 2016, I took 3 months off work to write a second book on stress, right? And I gave myself 3 months of sleepless nights looking at the way the world was coming, all the challenges that my kids were going to face, and I looked at the education that they were having, and it was literally the opposite of what they needed. The opposite, right? And so that's going round in my head, and then I get a call from a guy I've worked with a long time, say, can you come and do some work with some financial investors and traders in Australia? And I'm like, sure, of course, right? February in Melbourne, right? Anyway, it just turns out to be the anniversary of my gap year in Australia. And I think, well, I want to go to Sydney. And I had some friends in Sydney that I wanted to see. And I said, hey, are you coming? Do you ever come over to Melbourne? And they said, no, but why don't you come to Sydney? And so I'm like, well, what the hell? So I thought, yeah, I'll come to Sydney and I won't tell the missus straight away. I'll tell her it's business rather than social. And I thought, well, to do that also, I need to think about the tax man. So I need to arrange a few meetings in Sydney so it looks like business. And and one of those people that I met up with some ex-work colleagues, and I did some work with a consultancy firm, and they were out there. There was this guy who looked really interesting on LinkedIn, and it was Dave Harris, because he had this fascinating CV, because he was a physio, did an MBA at Oxford, joined a consultant firm, and then became marketing director of the NRL or something crazy. So I said, hey, I'm coming to Sydney, why don't we meet up? And he said, great. He said, I've just bought an esports team, you can tell me what you think. And I'm like, course, sure, yeah, no problem. And then I got off that message and that call, and then I thought, what the hell's an esports team? And
Good question.
This is back in February 17, when no one knew about it, right? And then we met for coffee, and then he said, "Oh, I'll take you up to meet the boys." And then we went up to that amazing apartment you boys had on the peninsula overlooking Sydney Harbour Bridge. And you were all just complaining about the light fittings, weren't you, and stuff. And
15 stories up, the Piedmont Pad. That's what we called it, the Piedmont Pad.
Piedmont Palace. That was it. And then I just saw you boys, so far so funny, right? But then you start taking me through what League of Legends was, right? And I start shaking with excitement, because this is the game that my kids need in order to learn how to be successful in a crazy, psychotic world. And then we just kept in touch, right? You guys had no money, and so it was helping you guys win your first grand final, and then Riot money came in to get us to Brazil, and then we're off to the races, right?
The thing that I love, Jono, is like your first, because remember, you had never seen the game before. Like you coming in, I mean, you were working into that, you didn't even know what esports was. And then we start describing this game to you. Initial reactions, like what were your initial reactions to the actual concept of the game? Like, was it, I mean, obviously it wasn't anything you expected, right? Like, what was your perception of a game before League of Legends?
Well, mate, I've got no background in video games. Like, none at all. I mean, we had this, there was just none. What it was, right, was the way in which that was, what I could see, it was, the map-based game. And so you could see there's a level of simplicity to the game, right? So you can start relatively quickly in lane, and you'll get killed a lot, but that's all right. But then the complexity of it and the way in which the nuance comes in, information theory, collaboration, the importance of a shared view, and also when you started telling me about the way that the patches came in and how the game kept changing. That was one of the things that I was most working with, and that was struggling with to help with the financial traders, is the way in which the market shifts and sentiment changes, but your beliefs don't. And it's what do you need to do to be able to shift your mindset, but also just to say, well, hang on, I think this is true. Let me just verify it again, and I'll keep verifying it again. And then you say, oh, holy shit, it's changed. And what I did last time will not generate the same result. So one of the things that happens in the markets is that if you get successful, then what made you successful will no longer work because everyone starts to copy it. And I mean, even now, right, you can do that automatically. You find a trader that you like, and you can literally copy their trades, right? So that can, if you get big enough, that just blows you out of the water. So you've got to keep thinking about, well, how can I evolve? How can I get better? And where is this all going? And what skills do I need to learn and develop? And that's what the best players were doing. I'm not saying you boys were doing that, but that's really what you had to do, right? Is to always be thinking about what's coming next and what's coming next, and not just having the best players, but you had the best understanding of the game and how things worked. And so the whole thing around decision-making, risk-taking, what players, we'll get into this, when players test their limits, and it's just, make crazy risks, right? And it's just, well, guys, I've seen this on the trading floor, Don't lie to me.
It took a while for. I remember you. One of the first times you were there, and you were watching us do scrims, and you were saying, I could imagine myself being in your shoes, and just being like, this is the most inefficient way to do practice possible. Like, we're gonna do practice. Like, this is just not how you do it. And it's so funny because I'm this really cocky, arrogant 21-year-old guy, and this guy who's never been
some boomer. Like, what does this guy know?
Some old man comes in.
Nathan, you should probably move your mic a little bit further away. It's a bit too close, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell is this? How can this guy tell me how we're gonna do scrims? He doesn't play League. He doesn't know the game. And then I'm thinking to myself, all right, Dave, what have you got? What joker have you brought in here, honestly? This guy, this trader, this business guy, what is he going to know? And over time, you develop that trust with me, Jono. And there definitely were a few things we we had to optimize with our practice. And it just got me thinking, if I was in that position, in your shoes, watching those scrims, because now I think back, I'm like, even now when I watch scrims, because I'm kind of on the outside of the esports, and when I hear and I reflect on how scrims were done, how inefficient the post-game review was, the conversation, the communication in-game. Tell us a little bit for you. When you came in, what were the biggest red flags?
Stop a second. I just need to take a moment because you're triggering me again, right? This
is post-traumatic stress right now. Jono's sitting there behind us. I mean, you're excited, Jono, but you're also like, there's a lot of work to do here.
Happy place. But you know what? And it's well, Dave's told me that you guys are the best in Oceania, and but but the other thing, mate. I mean, joke bullshit aside, it was just that was something that I'd seen so often, right? You got a guy that knows his stuff but doesn't know how to pass it on to other people, and so your approach was to get louder and louder. And I remember watching you do a review session, and you were just basically telling the guys off, right? You didn't do this, 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 right? But I remember that one of the first things we had was so when we started working after MSI, and I think that was when you guys then were open to the learning, right? When it went south, and you went from Shern saying we fear no one but the Koreans to then not making it through to even the knockout stages, right? And then you were saying, John, it's like, well, guys, we need to be doing stuff, and it's like, we don't have time. I said, what do you mean you don't have time? I said, it's like, well, we're too busy scrimming. And you guys had 9 games a day, right? 3 blocks of 3 scrims. I remember writing that paper about what needs to happen for learning to take place, to persuade everybody else, all the other teams, to drop down to 6 games a day, which even then is still a lot, right? It's still, when you look at it, when we got into the whole thing around how much learning could there be in each game, you think, well, you know what, 6 is too many. And even when we're in the LEC, the 6th game was always a blowout. The guys just didn't have the discipline to maintain it, and they just didn't. They still don't have that mindset for making practice serious. And one of the lessons that I'd learned from sports teams is that as they become professional, if you look at rugby, for example, they started off training 8 hours a day. When they first went professional, they were training 8 hours a day and got injured, and then very quickly scaled it back. So now the practice was, at times you can get down to 90 minutes or even less some days, because it's all about the recovery and all about the learning and taking stuff forward and building shared views, which is really what we were all about, right, by the end of it.
Yeah, well, this is actually leads me to a whole nother tangent point, and this is something that I spoke about recently in one of my videos, Jono, and spoke about burnout, and I spoke a little bit about we're talking a little bit about the longevity of players in esports nowadays. Nowadays, you see players retire quite often at 24, sometimes 23, at max, 25. That's their career. 23, 24, 25, league players. Now, I was thinking about this. I was thinking, all right, why is this the case? And because Dopa, I don't know if are you familiar with Dopa out of interest, Jono?
No.
So to give a bit of keep it short here, Dopa is pretty much known as the best SoloQ player of all time. And this guy was rank 1 in Korea for the last... He's been rank 1 in the Korean SoloQ for the last... How many seasons, Nathan? About 7 seasons?
7, 8 years, yeah.
Was it the last 7, 8 years? And he never went pro, right? This guy never went pro. And recently he came out with a post saying he's retiring, going to the military and putting away League. And so he came up with this basically his philosophy on the game. And when I was reading, I'll actually link it to you off air later on. But one of the parts he talks about is how he feels like he's not good enough, and like younger players are just going to be better than him. So he feels like it's harder and harder for him to get rank 1 each year. And it started to, like, the way he was framing this entire Reddit post in my mind was him justifying in his mind why he can't be good anymore, rather than thinking of all the reasons why he can be really good. Because and I was thinking to myself, okay, what do we know about reaction times and things like that in traditional sport? And I read a few things saying how reaction times don't really start decreasing until 25. Like, you're actually at your peak at around 24, like 23 to 24, 25. You're at your peak in terms of reaction times. But if you think about a young player who's 18, cool, they might have decent reaction times and a little bit more micro ability. But how much does that stack up against years and years of experience? Okay? And what the conclusion I came to with Dopa and all these older players is that it's not the physical. It's all up here. It's the motivation. It's the drive. It's the I've been beaten down. I've had to play thousands of games each and every year, comparatively to traditional sport where you can change up the practice every day. You have rest periods. You don't have this constant grind. And yeah, I kind of want to get your thoughts on why do you think that we're just not seeing that longevity of players, and why are we seeing players retire so early? And do you think it's a physical thing, or do you think it's a mental thing? What do you think's going on here?
Well, when I first started talking to you guys, because it was one of the first things that Nathan said, because I said, why are you not playing? And he was like, that was when I learned about the phrase burnt toast, right? It's like, oh, I'm too old. Right? And he's like, what? You were still a child.
Yeah. Oh, Nathan as well. We should mute our mics when John is talking.
Okay.
Because we got background noise. Yeah.
And And so there isn't. They're absolutely right. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to play till you're 30. Now, I think there's a reason. One of the reasons why people haven't done that is because they've just had to get a job, and it's been most dominant, most manifest in Oceania, where the guys were, I know some of the players would have their parents every year sit them down and say, look, you've got to get a proper job now. You've got to go to uni. This was okay for a year, even 2 years, but now you've got to get serious about a career. That's now been, in Oceania, you've got to go to North America, right? So that's been taken away. But the financial reasons for playing the game now is like, you can make a lot of money on that. But 100%, there's a whole thing around the fatigue of being a player, dealing with SoloQ stuff, but also not clearing out and just getting tired of the bullshit, right? Of the arguments and people not evolving, so that you get a new set of problems. And I think that for someone like Dopa, like the player that you talk about, I mean, he's got to get on do his military service, right? He's a Korean kid, so that's unavoidable. But he could still, if he wanted to, I think he could still come back and he could still stream, right? He'd still have a fantastic career as a streamer. I know some players that were very popular would get mobbed on the streets in Korea, and they could easily have a career streaming, or at least for a few years. Let's see how it go for there and see how it lasts, right? See how it goes. But there's with all of the guys that I see, there's insufficient recovery, and that was really what you guys going down from 9 games to 6 games is that there isn't enough recovery. And it's one of the things that I've been thinking about myself, really, just with if I was going to help someone help gamers, it's really about there's a certain type of grind that's good, but it isn't, it's not the one that we talk about, right? The grind that you really want to get into is actually just that disciplined approach, and to focus in on how can you improve, but then to make sure you can take breaks. And so what you really want to be doing throughout this, if we're in competition play, right? It's like one of the things that when you're into the Worlds or MSI, it's like, you know what, guys, let's give everything, because we're going home on Saturday. So it doesn't matter sleeping, for the coaching staff, it's like for us, sleeping wasn't that important. So it's just, even with, in Fnatic working with them on 2019 at Worlds, it's like, guys, we're going home. We're going home Saturday. So don't you worry about pacing yourself. It's like we're giving everything to these players and to the team, and then we're going to see what happens, and we'll just collapse over the line, and we can afford to do that. But if you've got a whole season, then it says, well, how are you going to maintain your, not just your motivation, but how are you going to how could he give himself problems that he finds interesting? So rather than just seeing it as, oh, I just want to get to number 1 again, I know how to do that, he starts changing the conditions, right? And this is, for your guys who listen to this, it's like, well, okay, so if the only way of me, making rank 1 or climbing the ladder is to grind and to play 16 games a day, how could I do it on 8 games? And it's like embracing constraints. That's when it can free up creativity, and that's when it can really, really let you loose. And I think a lot of the time it's, with players that I work with, it's like, just play less, think more reflective practice, and grind. The grind that really needs to be taking place is grinding with your thinking, and just not ruminating, but just reflecting on your practice, going over your own videos, and then seeing where your mistakes are, but also the opportunities that you missed, in the sense of, well, I can get there next time. One of the things that you get from a trader, what makes a great trader versus a poor one, is their ability to handle losses. And that's not just that you can take the hit you can take getting punched in the mouth like a fighter would need to, but actually not only can you accept that you're going to make losses and you're going to have difficult periods, and that's part of trading, right? Anybody that wants to work in the markets and be in the markets is going to have a really bad spell, and you can get close to being cleaned out, or even cleaned out. You look at Dalio, one of the guys that I know we all read up on, and his gets cleaned out a couple of times in his career, if not, and almost now he's got the resources. It's like he might lose a trade, but he just protects himself, and it's like, well, okay, how can I come back, and how can I reflect on my practice, and how can I do it better and do it easier? I would say that Dopa, personally, when I looked at what these players were doing, and also as well, it's like the mechanical brilliance and this lightning-like reactions is overrated as a skill. It's crucial, and I can see why people focus on it, but actually, and it's like, it's like having lightning-like reactions in the markets. It's if you're having to do that again and again, then you're not handling yourself properly. You're not structuring your work sufficiently so that you can put the odds so far in your favor that you can account for the fact that you've got someone who is seemingly, supernatural in caps, for example. Some of the stuff he does, now that with my rudimentary understanding of the game, I look at that and it's like, holy shit, I don't know how that actually happened. Right? I mean, he 2v1, I think he might have 3v1 Excel when he was in spring, and it was just laughing. Backstage, it was just like, okay, well, nothing to do with that one then. But it's most of the time that's just because your fight selection's not so great. And if you look at the top soccer players, so someone like Ryan Giggs in English football, he realised when he looked at it, well, why do players have to retire? And it's like, well, they get injured. And why do they get injured? It's like, well, their bodies become, less flexible, more rigid, and more prone to injury. Well, what's an answer to that? It's like, well, take up yoga. And so he takes up yoga, and he also has, real preventative, practice and taking care of himself. Plays until he's 38, Manchester United, and the way he played changed, right? So that's the other thing, is that your way they play changes because other things, but you make it up in other areas. And gaming is no different in that sense. Especially, I think gaming is more like that really, because there's so much more of it where you can be so far ahead of other people in thinking that, they're not able to use the skills against you, right? The mechanical skills, this brilliance, it's just not important.
So then would you say, so right now, I mean, we have to all agree here that the way that everyone, even us ourselves, even the best players right now today, the way they got good was playing 18 hours a day, right? There's no way we can say that was not the case. So if that's true, then Jono, so does that have to happen in the first place? Like, or is this like, no, you can do this, like, let's say if you're an amateur player, like, right, you just play 18 hours a day, and then once you become a pro player, then you start doing all this sort of stuff?
Absolutely not. No.
So
no. There is no evidence to say that's worthwhile. People might be addicted to it, and they might have other reasons why they have to play 18 hours a day, but there's no way that it can lead to top performance. There's just all the research says that's just not the way, and it's exactly the same, right? So let's just take the physical metaphor, is you have to work your arse off. Right, I am not saying that you can glide your way to pro success, or you can glide your way up the rankings and make it to challenger or whatever level that you want to play at. You've got to work hard, but there's got to be a balance. And the reason why people get exhausted is because they overdo the grind, which is much more the physical. When what they need to be also looking at is, well, mentally, what am I doing? How am I stretching myself mentally? How am I shaping my understanding of the game? How is my working memory in game when I'm under pressure? When I go, mid to late, what are my challenges? Where am I strongest? Where do I fall down? And how can I fix that? And then the other one, which you were talking about, mindset, is your emotional relationship with the game, right? Both in game and also over the season or over the split, wherever you want to focus your attention. That's also the area where there's massive improvements that you can make. And I know you guys have covered off on I was watching one of them, the podcasts that you did about growth mindset and everything else and stuff, but it's just around the physical. It's like, well, do you know what? It's just, and it's what I was saying, the first thing when we got into it is like, guys, all you're doing is doing. And if you look at the simplest learning cycle, plan, do, review, right? If all you're doing is doing, then where's the reviewing and then where's the planning for next time? And if you just simply introduce those two steps, and even if it was just a daily review of your gaming, of how did I get on today? What was my intention? And what did I want to do over the course of the day? Let's say I play 6 games or 8 games maybe. What did I want to achieve and what did I achieve? What was my learning?
You always, when you first started working with us, when we started getting serious after MSI, coherence was a big thing for you. And that's something that really just took me off guard. It's like your heart rate, like your breathing is important. I mean, obviously, we've actually spoken a bit about Chippies, who we worked with, who was in our top laner, who had pretty big problems with this, but coherence actually helped him maintain that level of focus. Like, do you want to talk to us about the coherence and why you thought it was so important in League?
Yeah, and
is that still the case?
And Nathan, make sure that you mute a lot, because you got a lot of background noise.
Oh, do I? Okay.
Is your window open?
No, I think it's my computer.
Okay. All good.
Just repeat the question again, mate. I just.
Oh, sorry. Coherence. Your importance of coherence. Like that was a huge thing when you came in. You're like, come on, guys, we're going to be coherent. We're going to be coherent. And we had a lot of issues with, all our players. I mean, maybe even, ourselves or Curtis's coaching, like, after a review or something like that. So yeah, like why was that so important to you? And again, is that still the case today?
Okay. So, yeah, massive, it's massively the case, mate. More so. And I think what's really great to see is that the coherence, the heart rate variability stuff, and having a better relationship with your physiology is now becoming mainstream. All the hackers, all the life hackers have got into it. So I'm seeing now with people like, Tim Ferriss is talking about it, Adam Robinson's talking about it. There's just, Tony Robbins is into it now as well, even though he doesn't say that's what he's actually doing. But it's really about what is coherence? Well, what coherence is having a positive relationship with your physiology. And specifically, one of the things that scientists have found out, and one of my the best discoveries I made early on in my, like back in 2004 or 5, I think, when I came across this technology, was, okay, you can edit this out, right?
Yeah, we can edit things out, John. Yeah.
So just give us a second. Okay, so when you look at coherence, right, one of the reasons why I was focusing on coherence with the direwolves is that emotions were driving so much of your decision making. What you'd see is a player, and so they would make a mistake, and then they would go quiet and stop talking, and you could clearly see that they were worrying about what was going to happen after the game, and they start to look over, and no one talks to them anymore and stuff. So it shuts down the game. So people become incoherent. So instead of what you really want is a team working as one. So people are sharing information, and they're even and what the best teams will be sharing decision making as well, not in a democratic way, but getting information to the person who needs it most, who can make the most use of it, and then following that decision and going all in, right? And one of the things I think we learned was that if a team is willing to do that and go all in on a decision, it may not even be a great decision, but if it's fabulously executed violently, then that's going to lead to success. So they're aligned and they're coherent. Now, the other thing that I was referring to about coherence was actually physiological coherence. And that relates to the way in which your heart, lungs, and brain interact with each other so that they actually are coherent. And what that really is how to handle the stress response constructively when you're sitting at a desk, tapping on a keyboard, and yet your body is going through a hardcore fight-flight reaction. So your heart rate could be up at 170 beats a minute, 180 beats a minute, and going at, and taking your breath away, right? Because it's pushing you so hard. And what you've got to do as a player is to be able to stay calm under pressure. And where that started was just simply having rhythmical pattern breathing. And so that's when we got to the guys to start doing their breathing before the game. But what it also did was transforming your relationship with your emotions. And that's actually a much more valuable skill that I think some of the guys struggle to get beyond the breathing, because that was immediately practical. But it's really about how you talk to yourself in game. So, for example, right, to be coherent is one of the things I was looking for when so one of the things I was looking for was working with one player, and I was saying to him, I said, mate, I said, at the moment, you don't think you're part of this team, do you? He said, what do you mean? And he's got a bit upset. And I said, I saw what happened when you got killed. What did you do? And he's like, well, I had a drink, and kind of like he chilled out for 40 seconds, right? And I'm like, you will be a team player when, if you get killed, your first instinct is to, first of all, you may want to swear or whatever, that's fair enough. But then immediately you're looking at the map and you're talking to your teammates saying, guys, what's going on? And you're checking the opposition and seeing what they're up to, all the information, and sharing stuff, and then going through, right, what's next? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Where do you want me to go on the map? And that's when you're going to start to recover. And it's dealing with that setback, and what in trading terms would be how you're handling your losses, that's one of the measures of a really good player is how constructive are they when they get killed. And that all comes back to being able to deal with the anger or the disappointment with your own behavior for getting yourself killed, because it's often that, or a teammate's let you down, right? How do you handle that emotional drive? You want to shout, call him an effing idiot or something like that, and it's like, well, you might want to do that, fair enough, but then let it go. And to do that, you need to be physiologically coherent and then emotionally coherent, and then you can be cognitively coherent, because the stress response is not shutting down the frontal part of your brain, which in League, and this is one of the things that I found so attractive about the game, is that there is nothing else in the world where you have to have such an extraordinary working memory whilst under intense pressure. There's other games that are challenging, right? But there's nothing, I mean, CSGO and other top esports, but there's nothing that demands a working memory of League of Legends. It's inhumane, really, the demands on the memory, because it's just sick. The kind of stuff that one small choice, if you're, item purchase or whatever, and you've not remembered what your opposition bought or what the ADC bought 2 minutes ago, and you're not now factoring that into your decision making because you've forgotten this or that. It's that kind of thing that just demands just the highest levels of internal coherence, and it's just absolutely fascinating from a psychological point of view.
And this just came to mind when you were talking about coherence. If we think about some of the best players, and you would be aware of this, G2, some of the best teams, you've got G2. Now, there happens to be a trend where some of the most fun in the moment present players, whether you got Caps, who's laughing his way, he's very relaxed, he has fun while doing it. You got Perks, similar thing. Wonder, also from G2. All these players. You've also got players from other regions, even like Sword Art, right? Sword Art joining TSM. I feel like he has the same vibes, and Sword Art was in the grand final, on Suning. Now, would you say there is like a potential natural advantage that these players have purely because they are able to remain somewhat coherent because they aren't, or they're able to put aside their emotions within a game or after they die? Like, what's going on here with these players? And as a follow-up to this, do you think that there is a danger of being too intense comparatively to these players where they're kind of having a bit of fun, they're not relaxing, but they're intense at the same time as being fun, but they're not overthinking things? Because you can compare that with traditional sport. Is that the case? Do you want a real, like, in boxing, you want a super intense, like a Mike Tyson, you want a fierce, aggressive, adrenaline-filled sort of beast. But in League, what sort of competitor do you want?
This is where the physical analogy breaks down, right? But you want someone who's a competitor, right? And how they manifest that. I mean, but G2's challenge, I think one of the things is that I think they were as a group they're very cohesive as a five, and I understand from that actually that's one of the consistent things with having worked with Joey, who was on G2 for quite a while, is that they were fairly chilled and most of the time, right, as a team. And it's one of those things, and some of it is the luxury of being better than everybody else, right? And there's just as a group, it's like, I mean, I know there's some bias in this, but there was one split where I think G2 were the all-star, all of G2 were the all-star team in the LEC, and it's like, well, do you know what? You could argue maybe, but they were that good, right? But let's just look at what kind of emotional state is really helpful. So one player, so for example, Schernfire liked to be a bit pissed off, right? And in game terms, there's some players in rugby that you like to think, oh, this guy's insulted my grandmother and stuff, so I'm going to give him some stick. And that's fair enough to an extent. But what the focus needs to be on, what can I do? Right? So you need to have, and that's the issue with negative emotional states, like this intensity. It's usually that it's not that they say, oh, this guy is an intense player. It's actually they lack self-regulation and they don't know what to do with negative emotions. So when things go wrong, instead of thinking, do you know what, I'm owning up to that. And even if I didn't do all of it, I did my share. So I might be 40% of the reason why we just lost. I'm going to take 60% of the blame and responsibility, and I'm gonna front up and I'm gonna get after that and say, right, how can I be even better? And then also, how can I work with my teammates so that we can be even better next time? So there has to be you have to deal with negative emotions in that way. And what you've got to be able to do to contain your own negative emotions, and then get into how can we make this better, or even, if you're ahead, is how can we keep snowballing this? How can we keep doing positive things? And that requires positive emotion, because the reason that you cannot be creative when you're negative. If you've got a negative emotional state, the chemicals in your body don't get produced to make synaptic connections in your brain, which is something called dopamine, right? You literally can't create it. So when you get stressed and negative, then it makes you uncreative, and that's really what we need in game, especially when things are going bad. I think one of the things that separates G2 is the way in which the game is lost and they still come back, right? And they have, not only do they have that one play where they're able to turn it, and it's the same with Fnatic, right? And I was on the receiving end of that on Excel, but also we benefited from that on, at Worlds, right? And just saw them do that, and it was always, this isn't over, right? And that mindset of, I've still got a chance to win, which is always has to be a positive state. Now, the extreme end of that is, guys appearing not to give a shit, and laughing and joking and everything else and stuff. But being able to laugh about getting killed is much more constructive when you're in a Worlds final than, going quiet and silent and thinking, oh my God, we've just lost, rather than saying, oh, this shit happens, let's get after it. And that's really where the difference is in this whole thing. And it's really about being on the emotion, having a positive mindset. But it's not just being, delusionally positive. It's actually, when shit happens, how can you get from negative to neutral to positive as quickly as possible? And that really needs to be, at the very least, that needs to be in the time it takes you to respawn. You've got to have your shit sorted and be back on it.
So how do we go from negative to positive, Jono?
Well, I've just been writing one of the programs that I'm writing. So I wonder if you guys are if your fans are interested, I can send out a couple of modules on that, on around heart math and everything else and stuff. But
we can link anything we need to in the YouTube description. Any links you want to send us about heart math and stuff like that, because that's what we used in Dial, was heart math, or any articles, Jono, we can definitely link them.
So negative to positive. Well, the first thing one of the things that, this is for a gamer, right, is, bloody hell. So the first thing is to watch your mouth, right? So I'm not talking about, I am talking about when you're in game with teammates, right? But actually, what are you saying to yourself through the game and in your life, right? When you wake up and you look in the mirror, what are you thinking? Right? What thoughts pop into your head? Tomorrow morning, after someone's listened to this, just do that experiment and ask yourself and find out, what is it that I'm saying to myself? And if it isn't something you would say to the person you love the most, to your dearest friend, then you need to sort out how you speak to yourself. Right? And that usually most of us have some really weird beliefs about ourselves, and mostly negative. And at the very best, sometimes it could be positive but delusional. Right, and we don't really care about ourselves that much. And people in gaming, they tend to have quite a negative perspective most of the time. There's a few people that really are as chilled as they appear. Like Hillesank, for example, he is as laid back as he looks. Right, I've never known him, and I've messaged him, since leaving and saying, "Mate, tough loss." He's like, "Oh, it's all good." He said, "We know what we did. We've got it." Right, and next game he comes straight back. Right. But most of the time, it's like, well, what's your self-talk like, and how are you perceiving yourself and your sense of identity, right? So their stuff. That's some big stuff in that one, right? But
so a lot of you're talking about there, John, is stuff before the game. So this is not even about like getting into the moment. It's about before the game.
So here's the thing, right? So one of the things that I found stressful all the way through my career, and one of the reasons why I've come out of esports, is that there is this whole thing around what's in game and what's out of game, right? There is no out of game. There is only in game. And the question isn't, is it in game or is it out of game? The question is, at what point in the season will this become in game? Right? And some decisions, they become in game at the Worlds. You've got to get to Worlds for it to come out. If you look at how we managed to patch up the team, the
Do you have any specific examples, Jono? Like specific examples that you can touch on without calling people's names out? You know,
Okay,
There were so
mate,
many
mate,
situations.
so many, right? So the 18th season, right? I mean, how we lost our way to the grand final and to Worlds, right? That has got to be one of the craziest runs in it. I think did we go undefeated in the run?
Yeah,
up
we
to
were
Wuhan?
undefeated. We were
Right.
undefeated.
And there's times, mate. You got. I mean, I don't know if you've spoken about this, but there's times when you're like, how are we undefeated?
Yeah.
Genuinely.
I probably ask that question every day. We were all confused.
I mean, we were stringing that team together. We were band-aids everywhere. We would
Right.
not.
And do you know? And it's out of game, and there's friction between these players. It's out of game, and it's like, do you know what? It's like okay. So, and I remember we're in Korea, and I'm thinking, oh god. Well, actually, it was in Australia when I was over with the traders again, and I came and spent 2 weeks with you guys in the August, right? And I'm looking around, going, do you know what? It's like the chairs that got broken, right? And me patching those up, and it's like, yeah. So that chair, boys, if you want to put it up against a wall and it doesn't go away from the wall, that may still be good, right? But do not have, do not.
No one's sitting on that. No one's jumping on that couch. It's
The
not
others,
getting touched.
Absolutely. The others were keep that in the cupboard and move it out. Just put it in the room when you move out, because I'm not putting my name to that at all. And so it's like, it's just all the stuff, all the issues that we'd patched and bodged and dealt with in Australia, and then we made it to grand finals. Holy shit, we've won! My God, that was what a win. And then we make it to World, or we make it to Korea, to boot camp, similar problems, and it's like just patching, and then you get to Worlds, and the pressure comes in, and it's big enough, and then all your habits that you got away with, and it's like, well, actually, you just get found out because you're now heading into all players can play now, right? And it's a difference between going from college where you can dominate to going to NFL where everybody is a rock star.
It's
So
just
if
a
you're not-
confidence
right.
thing. Do you reckon, Jono? Do you reckon there's an element of confidence? Like, deep down, like when you're in this moment, we haven't really done the work. Like, isn't it? There's an element to it where it's...
100% there's confidence, but there was no way that confidence would have got you there because we just weren't good enough. We just weren't good enough to make it to groups, right? And it's just all the stuff that I'd been worried about just came out in those games in Wuhan, and it's exactly the same. And it's just on every team that you're on, all the stuff that you haven't addressed is pulled into the game because you've got 5 people on stage under intense pressure, and when you're under intense pressure, everything is in play. And it comes into, so for example, right, you're going to have guys that are grinding 18 hours a day and eating shit as well, right? So they're literally starving their brains of nutrients. So that's a long-term issue over cognitive impairment and memory loss and everything else, right? So, but short-term, they can make up for that in being just physically better and faster, and maybe they've got a better read on the meta, right? They've got a head start, or they've got, they watch your videos and yeah, I was kind of joking. But they watch your videos.
Curtis videos, yeah.
Or they start, what, I've done my homework. And so I beat them, and I get there. It's just that then you get tired. And it's, I mean, one of the things that, like Fnatic, for example, in Wuhan, when they did the reverse sweep, the strength that they had of character and of just being fit enough to handle 10 hours of gaming, right, from the first game to the last game. It may have even been 12 hours. I think they had their first game at 10 hours, first game at noon, and their last playoff, I think it was like the second or third playoff game, was 10, 11 o'clock at night, right? And it's like, if your fitness then comes into play, and the nutrients that you ate a month ago have a very small impact, but that's at that level, that's the difference that it makes. And so that then you're getting into in-game and out of gaming, that it's all in-game. And so it's just helping people to have healthier habits and stuff. Like, for example, one of the things being negative is eating crap will make you give you a bad mood, right? It's been proven. Messing with your stomach, having really poor stomach bacteria, that will put you in a bad mood. It can make you depressed.
It's the same as lack of physical exercise as well, isn't it?
100%. And it's and for your all your guys, it's like, look, just move after each game. Our absolute maximum 3 games, take a break. Maximum 3 games, but preferably if you're in the queue, then what's to stop you from doing 20 squats while you're waiting? right? Just to get your heart rate, just to stretch off, and just to feel the tension in your neck and your back and stuff, and just open things up again, and open your back up, and then just stand in your power stance, which is a really strange research, but very funny, and just reconnect with you, and move your hands and everything else and stuff. The thing that I found staggering in that sense is when we're backstage on all the, having got to quarters, right, in 2019, is that nobody has a warm-up routine. Not one person. And remember when I was seeing you first time at MSI, it's like, guys, where do you warm up? It's like, oh, we don't. And it's like, well, okay. And I'm looking
The extent
around.
of warming up is going into a custom game beforehand and playing, just like warming up our hands. And we know we have like the hand warmers and stuff.
Yeah.
So what's the importance of having a warm up? So you're again, we're getting into the specifics. It's like, you get on stage, you're playing, using your mouse gun in the custom game or whatever. What's the importance of a warm up, Jono? And I mean, what did we do in Brazil?
So if you got guys that want to be pros, what you've got to be able to do is have your own internal warm up, because you can bet that backstage, even at Riot, there will not be facilities to do any kind of warm up ritual. You've got to be able to get your head in the game. And so in the sense of, well, okay, so how do I prepare myself to perform, right? Do I just, with everything that's important, if I'm doing an important speech at college or even asking a girl out, what's my rehearsal process and how do I get myself so I'm talking to myself in the most supportive way and I'm ready when it matters? And it's just in sporting terms, it's like, well, are you stretching off? It's like the idea that, I've got some pictures, I took some pictures of the stage in Berlin, right, which is, and it's Riot's home, and we've got this table with curtains around it for warm up, and it's like, well, there is no warm up then. But it's really about how does someone prepare themselves. So if they're going into SoloQ, how are you preparing yourself for the day? Have you got your notes? Have you got your notes for what you want to focus and what you want to talk about? Or in game, this is my notes for what I want to talk about. But actually, have you got your notes for what you want to do today? What questions have you got about the the new season or the patch changes, or what do you want to do if you're going to play one champion or try to play one champion for most of the day because you want to build up your skills on that? What areas do you want to focus on? Right, and okay, so just tell me then, what's your if you're looking at your best standard as a player on that champion, what's your best play? What does it look, sound, and smell like? Right, so the player gets that into their head. This is me at my best. And for some players, I'd be saying, guys, just get your phone out. And it's like, right, what we'd have with some players is we'd get their highlight reel, and it's like there'd be in little videos on their phone, so that even with all the challenges of being backstage, no computers to practice on, and just having a screen to watch the current game on stage, is like, okay, helping someone to say, what's your best plays? So you're thinking about you at your best. Or it's like, well, okay, so look at your notes. Before you go on stage, you're up against this opponent. So what are all the things you need to focus on and remember with this champion? Is that my...
Yeah, no, I don't hear anything. I think it's your one. We don't hear it anyway.
Okay.
So, there's so much to unpack here, but, there was before you were talking about, how there's no out of game. We have the in-game, and then no one talks about the out of game. And we know, and I talk about this within my videos, is the likelihood of you performing in a game has largely been decided by the mood you're in, your schedule, like you said, your diet, the amount of exercise you've done, the mindset, mentality that you're actually in heading into that game. Do you have intention with what you're trying to get out of this game? Yeah. This is all stuff that's before you're even in the game. This is all decided. Now, it's what I've seen, I would say, as a trend across esports and across league, is that, and if this kind of goes into society, is that we are in a very short-term thinking mindset. We don't, and when I talk to SoloQ players or my coaching clients or people in my Discord, a lot of the attention or the discussion is not how this game is going to influence their improvement over the next 100 or 500 games. It's this game is life or death, and because I lost this game, my day is ruined. This one game, I'm done. It's this short-term mentality, short-term thinking, and I'm very passionate about this because, I see so many players that are aspiring to go pro. We get these young 16, 17-year-old kids who really high rank. They have a lot of potential. They can actually make a career out of this, or they become a streamer, whatever they want to do. And they're so caught up in that game, or this one moment, or this what am I going to do next, rather than, okay, this is important. Not to say it's not important, but how is this going to play out across the next few months, years? How do I set myself up for success in the months, years to come? Yeah. So, what advice would you give to someone to try and encourage more of this long-term oriented thinking? And maybe you would have done some of this work with your son. I'm assuming he's trying to develop this sort of longer-term approach. So, tell us more about this and what your thoughts are on this.
Okay, so the thing to remember about League of Legends is it's a game of strategy played at 200 miles an hour, right? And it starts with strategy. And I know in SoloQ, it's not that important. It is important, but it's not that important, right? But the draft in League of Legends is probably the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen in my life. In any kind of performance endeavor, the way in which 2 people or 4 people plus the players can go up against each other and fundamentally change the nature of the game and how it's going to play out before it's even been played. That's some serious ninja shit, right? It's just legitimately amazing, right? And I think in that sense, if you look at going back to the player that's retiring, is that there's something in League of Legends where you have just got to be around the game for years in order to understand the champions and the items and everything else, but also your history. You've got to know your history, right? So in that sense, you've got to have strategy, and that is what the game's about. And if you're on the wrong side of strategy, it doesn't matter that you're a carry. It's like, well, actually, if it's a tank meta, then you're screwed, right? So you've got to understand strategy, and you've got to have that longer term view of, well, do you know what? It's like, well, how can I? So just to go back to the whole thing about in game, out of game, right? So what that can, if I just say there is no out of game, it means that everything's important, and that's on one level it's true. But what it means is I can't now make decisions, right? Because you've got to focus on everything, right? Focus on everything, right? And the thing that you get in mind, and one of the things that can happen with. One of the issues I had on one team was that one coach was so obsessed with this. The guy there's a cycling coach in Britain called Dave Brailsford, and he pioneered he made famous the 1% rule, or the marginal gains thing, right? Is that if you make very small improvements across lots of small things, then that can add up over time, right? If you get 1% better over the course of a year, then you're in like thousands of percent better over the year, right? So what you've got to think about as a player is say, okay, so what are my strengths and weaknesses? How do I match up versus other people? And don't trust yourself to do this. Get a mate to do it, or a coach. You genuinely get one of you guys to say, okay, let's look at your champion pool and let's look at what's likely to happen in 2021, and let's see where you're going to come out with that kind of thing. Let me watch your gameplay. Let's look at this and have a picture of what is mastery in my field and where do I currently stack up. Right, so then you look at, well, okay, now of all the things that I can, recognizing that diet is relevant, and it's like, well, I'm going to focus on what are the biggest opportunities, not the 1%ers, but the 30, 40, 50%ers, right? How could I reduce? So one of the things you want to look at is what is my bounce back ratio? So what is the percentage of the likelihood of me losing the next game when I've just lost this game? What is it? Right, and in what way are they linked, and how can I improve that so that I can eliminate the connection between losing a game versus then getting momentum build, a negative momentum build, and then losing the next one. Because if you look at any championship team, they've got to come. No one goes 3-0 in a final unless you're playing a European team and you're from China, right? It just doesn't happen. You've got to be able to come back. So you look at your bounce back. But it could also be, well, actually, for you, mate, you need to focus on this skill. Or your laning is just not good enough. And so actually, first 10 minutes is all you need to focus on. The rest of the game doesn't matter. That's actually all right. But it's like looking at the thing, it's like you're just going to get caught out at the next level. And that's the other thing, is that your picture of mastery is always based on the next level, because it's an up or out system in this sense, right? It's like working on a major consultancy firm, is that you never measure yourself based on the level that you're at. It's always on the next one. So whatever level you're at, then you think, well, okay, if I'm diamond 3, actually what would be appropriate? If I was diamond 3, where could I get to in a season? If I've showed promise.
I reckon if you're diamond 3, you could get challenger if you're really dedicated.
Okay, so in that sense, it's all right. So if I'm going to make, how could I make challenge? Okay, right. So what's challenger standard? What have they got versus what I've got, right? And also the other thing that when this gets into your mindset is backing yourself enough to be able to handle reality. And that's really where the whole thing around dealing with a negative situation is, and this is where your self-talk comes back in, is trusting yourself. Say, you know what? I am way, way back on this, right? I'm way back, and I have been way back in my life before, and I've been dedicated enough and focused enough and intelligent enough to be able to get to where I want to go. So that's what I'm going to do. So I am going to trust myself to have that plan. And that's one of the things about dealing with negativity in game, is believing that there is no another game. This is the only game there's ever going to be. And so you get too focused on today instead of thinking, do you know what, kid? It's like you can get wiped out at Worlds, right? And the question is, how much have you learned, and can you still afford to come back? Right, and so we're, if we're working, one of the things that I think Dalio was so good at in trading is say, well, is managing your losses, and compartmentalizing them so you can never lose so much that you can never come back. And that's really where you're looking at with that one as well.
So Johnny, you talk a lot about dealing with negative emotions, and again, the ability to bounce back after losses. And I mean, would you say that from the experienced players you've worked with, just from our experience, I mean, the people we coach, Curtis, very rarely people are playing at their best. I mean, people are probably so far down. I mean, we can get into why we think that's so difficult for League of Legends. But what would you say, Jono, are the characteristics or traits that players have that you've worked with that are really important? They need to have that before they can. I mean, obviously, all this stuff is important as well, like dealing with negative emotion. Because again, like at the end of the day, we're so far behind in esports. We're not doing all this stuff right now. There must be some things that we're doing well. Like what's that? Like competitive drive. You talk about working memory. Like they're very, can just deal with a lot of information at once.
I'm so grateful for like coming out of esports and being able to work at that level on how people perform cognitively, right? The thing that's just so remarkable about League of Legends is it is a I was joke with you boys, esports is mental. and so how does someone handle stress and pressure, and being able to be backstage or watch the guys in scrims and how they deal with the adversity, how they do or don't come back. That's just been so helpful for me helping people in normal endeavors, right? So I know there's one of the questions that we had from one of you, one of the listeners asking, well, okay, so how do I translate what I'm doing in game into out of game? And it's that one of the key things is the way in which you handle losses. But to go on to the negative, right? One of the things, let's accept for a minute that I'm a typical gamer, and let's say for whatever reason I have a slightly negative view about my performance and myself, right? As one player says, I think I'm a piece of shit, right? And so in that sense, maybe you can recognize a friend, right, who's got that view of themselves, right? So that could take some quite in-depth therapy. And the thing is, you know what? It's like, well, would it really work? And CBA on that one right now. What I would encourage people to look at is how can I make my experience of my 8 games, or let's just say someone wants to play 16 games today. How can I make them more enjoyable? What would make this game more enjoyable to me? Because it's called a game, right? You might want to go pro, but if you're miserable on the grind and on the climb, then you'll be miserable when you make it.
And that's what I find. I find that players that I coach, it's like it's so hard. I feel like I'm pushing up boulders because their experience, the way they describe it, it's miserable. I actually couldn't improve in their shoes. It feels like it's like you got to stop playing the game. Like it feels so terrible. Or again, you say we need to find ways to make it enjoyable.
100%, right? And but also more varied, right? And it's all about, the guys are thinking it's all about win-loss, right? So one of the things that really makes Joey Youngbuck different is, and this was one of my insights at Worlds, right? Was like being on the receiving end of when you get, can we get a set of scrims against Fnatic, right, in Wuhan, right? And like, I've seen the manager in the gym, or I went and helped them, we've got a set of scrims. And it's like the willingness of Joey just to try something in a scrim, right? Doesn't give a shit about win-loss. Not just, interesting. And he's like, and they say to the guys, we're going to try this. It's like, really? It's like, yeah, I just want to see how it would play out. Okay, right. And they would do that. And it's like, win-loss doesn't matter. And it's like, and scrim results don't really matter, and it's like SoloQ results don't really matter that much. I know it matters, if you're going for promotion or demotion and stuff, but really, if it means it just, so what? Right, it's meant to be difficult, and so but the whole thing is, and that's why I introduced to you guys like the gamer analogy, the gamer acronym, right? If you remember that, right? And this is all about your internal motivation. So if you're going to have let's say you freed your time up, you're gonna have a day of grinding, right? So what I would ask you is, what would you like to grow, or in what way could you grow today? Growth and learning, right? So that's the G of gamer. Right? It's like growth and learning, right? So have a focus on that today. Achievement, right? And not just actual achievement, win-losses, but actually sense of achievement. What would cause me to have a sense of achievement about my work today and about my practice, right? The next one is meaning, which for a lot of gamers, they say, what the hell are you talking about, John? And it's like, well, could you do something that would take you beyond the game whilst you're playing the game? So some of that could just be connecting with someone in another part of the country and playing together and having a good time and helping each other, right? It could be, your cousin wants to get into the game and you think, you know what, all right, mate, I'll give you 2 games, right? Let's go in, let's queue up together and I'll play with you and I'll support you, right? And you get to experience the joy of introducing someone to your favorite game, right? Which is just legit, right? It's just fantastic. Tom and I, you're asking about Tom. One of the most fun times I've had with Tom is we're playing League of Legends together. Right, very, very badly. But one of the great things is I was actually at that stage. That's the one game where I'm actually better than Tom. He plays Fortnite and FIFA, right? Doesn't really play League of Legends. So I'm actually better than him. And so I was able to help him out, which was just so much fun, right? But it could be you got a mate or you're helping someone out, or you just think, I'm just going to connect with someone, and that's the meaning of the game. Right? There's a bigger meaning, as in what difference can I make to other people, or how could I inspire young people, or a lot of these kids that get into esports and gaming is they come from really quite challenged backgrounds. So one of the things that you can really make a difference as you're climbing and as you go pro is you can help other kids that have got similar problems to you, right? And that you can literally save lives doing that, right? So in that sense, but day to day, it's like, well, just have a better connection with someone. The next one on the E, so we've got growth, achievement, meaning. The next one is enjoyment and engagement. And so in that sense and it could just be fun, right? So do you know what? I am good. Let's do a lane swap, right? So it's like, and let's just have a bit of fun today. But it's also as well the way in which you show up. And remembering how absorbing this game can be, not from an achievement point of view, but just because it's just so fascinating that you're going to engage with it in a way that you are totally present and totally up for it. And so in that sense, it's like, well, your enjoyment and engagement, and focus on that. And then the next one is relationships. So it's like, well, it could be linked with meaning, but it's also, how could I explore or improve my relationship with the game today? Whatever that means to that person. Right? How could I have a better relationship with the game? And some of that could be, do you know what? I'm not going to play 18 games. I'm going to play 10. But I'm going to focus in. I'm going to make sure, and I'm going to watch my mindset and just think about how can I be a little bit better prepared, and have flexible learning goals when you're going into scrims. Because that's one of the challenges that we had. Right? It was like, well, actually, you can't specify specific learning goals that you could normally specify if I was running a rugby team or I've got a friend who's taken over British athletics, and so in that sense they can be very specific about what they're going to learn today in practice. But in SoloQ you can't. So having a few goals, and it's like, well, I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna improve my relationship with the game because I'm the way in which I approach a champion, or I'm gonna just watch my mindset, and I'm just gonna have a big view about how I approach wins and losses. How am I when I get killed? Maybe I could improve my relationship with the game that way, so that I can take a loss, get killed, and then come back even stronger and see what I can do. So in game, I'm bouncing back faster. How's that? So that's gamer, right? So that's growth, achievement, meaning, enjoyment, engagement, and relationships.
I love the meaning part. The meaning part. Well, Curtis and I talk a lot about this.
Yeah.
Is meaning sort of like goal as well, Jono? Like, why, or is it more like why are you playing the game? Because Curtis and I have talked about this before. It's actually a good question you need to know. And we sort of categorize it into, becoming a pro player, just having fun, enjoying your games, and but also sort of trying to figure out as well as like, do you not know why you're playing, and then you're moving into the addiction realm.
Well, but I think that a lot of people as well, we've realized it just. There's the enjoyment factor of just getting better at the game.
Just challenging yourself. It's like a
Challenging
challenge.
yourself.
Like the rank systems, it's great. It's hard to climb.
Mate, one of the really dangerous things about professional sports is just how demotivated a lot of the players are, and how disrespected, right? And just treated as a win-loss machine, and no one and people don't care about them, and so in that sense, the feeling that they matter and that they mean something on a team. That's actually what's one of the things that I've seen on most teams really, is that players thinking they don't matter. And so as a leader, it's making sure that they feel that way. But also if someone doesn't feel that way, it's like, well, how can I make sure I do? And that, I think, is one of the great things about the fan interaction. I know it can be a bit toxic at times, but the whole thing about being approachable and being, being a decent bloke, or being, and this is, I've only worked with pro guys, is that, well, you're being decent. And someone like Broxer, for example, the inspiration, I honestly think that guy could be Prime Minister of Denmark if he wanted to be, right? He's so professional in everything he does. And it's like, well, do you know what? And it's like, well, I would want my son to emulate him. And so in that sense, it's like being an example and being an inspiration for someone, and remembering, if you found it hard coming through, and there have been times for all of us, especially now as well, with all the crazy shit going on in 2020, there's times when you felt really low. And if you just had someone just tap you on the shoulder and say, hey mate, I've just seen your play, and I think you could be really good. Keep at it. Right? Or, hey man, it's like, I saw your tweet, just, it's not that bad, just get back into it, and let's do a couple of games. And in that sense, it's like, by helping someone else, then there's no way you can't. That's one of the things, like if you're feeling down about yourself, then one of the best things to do is to help somebody else. Not to try and make yourself happier, but to try and make your crew happier. And I think that's one of the things that is so desperately sad about esports and about the gaming scene as well, is that nobody is thinking about the scene. Nobody thinks that SoloQ is their problem. No one thinks that mental health problems in players is their problem. And it's like, and that's one of the things that was found, that probably the most frustrating thing of being in esports is when I said to guys, we've got a problem with mental health, the first thing people focused on is, what the hell is this we? There is no we, right? And that's really why it's like, well, and I was saying to, one of the things I might maybe speak about that later.
Well, I was going to just riff off here. It feels like there's like a lack of mindfulness and thoughtfulness. I would say mindfulness is a word that I never even thought about before you came on board in Direwolves. I had no idea. I would say, actually, out of all of the concepts, all of the books that you introduced me to, all of the thought patterns and the way you viewed the world, the one thing that just stood out to me, and it seems very obvious now, is that, like, I can actually become more aware of my own actions, which will help me improve in a much more efficient way. It felt like when I was younger, like when I was 18, playing the game, 17, 18, 19, I was playing, but there was no concept of just like, I am this organism, I am this thing that can actually learn how to learn or get better at learning. And before, I had this very fixed mindset growing up. I had this must have been the narrative I had internally, which was, I'm just going to put in work, get a result, and let's just see. That's just genetics. That's just my upbringing. Or that's just, I can only achieve what my body or my brain is capable of. But what you changed for me, which was the whole game change, was that, okay, cool. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm currently capable of. But there are things I can do to get better at learning. There's things I can do to better myself and become more aware of what is actually at play here, so that in a year from now, I'm not going to be the same person, and my level of play, my emotional control, my insight, everything is just going to be much higher. Now, this may seem like very basic, very...
No, mate, it's absolutely fundamental. And I was laughing, right, because it's one of the things, and it's working with players, and it's like this, the environment on this team's toxic, and it's like, you're right, mate, it is, and I'm looking at the main reason, right, and it's you got this star player that is absolutely toxic in their mindset and the way they treat other people, and they're complaining that the team morale is low. And it's like, well, first of all, look at what impact am I having on the team? Is that the impact that I want, and is that helpful? You might feel like you want that, but is it really what? If you've got a goal of getting to Worlds or winning Worlds, then maybe having creating a supportive team environment could suit you. So looking at that whole thing about what's my impact and how am I impacting this situation, and recognizing that if you are one of the top players or one of the alphas in this group, then you are having a massive impact. So whatever, and if in default, if you've been on the team for a long time, just take responsibility for it. Just say, this is my team, right? And it's like you look at players, and I was talking to someone on the team. It's like, mate, these are all your players now, right? It's actually my kids' football team, and this coach, Tom, helped out with this team. They were a bit short, and he was like, he normally plays on a Saturday, but he was playing on a Sunday for these guys. And this one coach was making the same complaint about these players that he made at under sevens, right? They're now 13, right? And I'm like, mate, this is your team, right? If you've got players that you have worked with for 6 years, they are making that mistake because of you, right? And what you have not been doing with them. So you cannot be complaining about they're doing this, this, and this, and think that it's them. What you've got to look at as a coach is like, well, oh God, how did I do this? Right? And as a leader, right? And you taking responsibility for this, and not in a neurotic way. So you'd be careful about owning that. And if you're on a toxic team, you saying I'm responsible for this, guys, that can get you thrown off the team, right? So be careful with that, right? But just this whole thing about having that leader mindset of you going, this is my team, John. I've got this. I don't want what I've got. How can I change it? And then understanding that if you're in League of Legends, if you're any good at League of Legends and you can climb the ladder, you are phenomenal at learning. Right? You may not think you are. You may think that you're great because you're great and you're just better than everybody else. It's just not true. You can learn faster than everybody else, and that is a gift. And that probably is the single most useful skill you can take from League of Legends to the world today, is how do I adapt and change to a world that's changing faster than everybody else, right? And it's one of the things I remember, I think some of the conversations we had, and in life, it's the difference between technical problems and adaptive challenges. And this is the issue that I've got with my kids' schooling, right? Is that a technical problem is one where there is an answer, right? And it's kind of like basic maths, right? Is that, you know what, if you just work hard enough, someone's already thought this through, so let's look at this. Heart math solution, right? Okay, technical problem. I change my relationship with something, I do something different, I apply it, something I already was doing, or just learn a new skill, all good, right? Technical problem, all good, all finished, right? And it's like, well, actually, that's not the issue that you face. In League of Legends, that's not the issue. The issue is something called an adaptive challenge. An adaptive challenge is one where you have to change not just what you're doing, but actually how you see yourself, and also your relationship with all your other teammates. And this is one of the things where you see the roles changing in importance and power, and what's strongest early game, or what's happening with jungle this season and everything else, is because an adaptive challenge causes the relationships to change around you. And that's the thing that's most fascinating, right? And some people just aren't able to either take a subordinate role. One of the things that I think Whippo does amazingly well is he can take shit for a long time, get killed, all the way to becoming dominant late game, and he can do it with really quite cheerfully. And there's very few top laners that can handle that, right? Is it just, do you know what, guys? I'm just going to get ganked I'm just going to get killed 8 times early game or early to mid game, and we're going to win. Bring it on.
And how do players in SoloQ develop more of this take responsibility? Because this is a message I push in my videos is, okay, cool. This situation happened. brilliant. Okay, even if a large portion of this game, let's just say 80% of it, you didn't really have anything to do with it, and even if you were Faker, nothing would have changed. Let's just say that's 80% of it. There is still 20% of it you contribute in some way, shape, or form. Or even if it's not what you contributed, it's what you missed out on doing. Maybe there was another way you could have approached this laning phase. Maybe you could have given more information. Maybe you could have used your wards better, in which that would have actually prevented your top laner from dying to that gank. There is always something you can do, and it's less about the specifics. It's more about the mentality that this facilitates, where it's like, holy moly, what is actually possible here? Like, if I am able to see this every single game, I wonder what else is possible if I can implement this next game. Like, well,
so the easiest thing you can do to improve your experience is to pair up, right? As much as possible is to duo queue rather than solo queue.
Well, you're a duo queue, interesting.
Yeah, so that's if you can, right? And I know that it's not always possible and it's difficult to do, but if you can duo, and the reason for that is that if there's two of you on a team, then you can really start to influence stuff. And the research on team effectiveness, on groupthink, that kind of stuff. If there's one person supporting the outspoken voice, then it's just, I think, between 5 and 10 times more likely to get listened to. If someone just says, guys, hear him out, right? I don't agree with him, but he's smart, and so let's hear him out, or let's hear her out. Right, so if you can duo queue, you're changing your environment because you've got one stable relationship and it's supportive, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't be duo queuing with someone, would you? Right. So and you can then start to dominate the game. So in that sense, it's like, well, take more responsibility there, and then work together as a pair and say, how can we improve our relationship, and how can we look further ahead? And also, you can look at the way you relate to players, and if someone ignores you and then they get killed. And then, are you a bit of an arsehole, in response, right? Because it could be that, you were right, but you were an arsehole afterwards. So it's like, what? So how can you get a guy back when they've just seen they've made a mistake, that you pointed out they were going to make a mistake? They did. It's like, can you pick them up and get them back on team? Because now you've got a moment of power where you can influence them positively, rather than saying, you fucking loser. And then just moving off, right? So how can you do that? The other thing I would encourage someone to do is get the balance between being 100% responsible for your stuff, but also not becoming neurotic and I say not taking too much responsibility for the whole thing. You cannot do that, right? You can't control the whole thing. You're not some master of the universe or some puppet master. This is a game of 5 people, and the crazy thing about SoloQ is it's 5 strangers most of the time, which is why I think duo queuing is so much more valuable. And it also, duo queuing with you, if you've got someone, I'm working with someone who's a bit better than me, and it's they're helping me, it's like, well, I can see somebody in game, and that can make a transformational effect. But taking responsibility for your own stuff. But also, the other thing with that, right, especially for these guys, is the importance of forgiveness, right? Not just of your teammates, but of yourself. And it's like, and it could be that you've set your intention when you start out with the growth and what level of achievement do I want today, or what's my sense of achievement, what is my best performance on this champion, and what am I delivering? You're now experiencing your average, so you've got to forgive yourself for not being Faker, right? And forgive yourself for that, and forgive yourself for making mistakes, and then think, what? It doesn't matter. I can make a mistake. What matters is what I do next. That's the key thing. And if you allow yourself to not forget your mistakes, but to forgive them, and then say, right, how could I be more structured? And when we're doing game reviews, right, it's like, I remember one time, Micky, the Korean player, right, played an Excel for, season in total, but I worked with him for
the mid laner.
Yeah, mate, that guy, the first day he came up to practice, I was absolutely certain we were going to make playoffs. The guy's game awareness was just, I've never seen anything like it. The way in which he improved people's collective intelligence of the group. It was absolutely amazing, right? And there was one time when the guys were arguing. This was like mid-season. They were arguing about what happened. There was some fight, and it was just coming out into river, heading over towards Baron, right? And underneath, coming out of the mid tower and then coming over Baron. And everyone was arguing about where we should have been positioned and everything else and stuff. And Micky said, what, it's not important. I know we lost the game there, but we didn't lose the game there. We lost the game 2 minutes earlier, or a minute and a half earlier, when we went to Dragon, and we all went to Dragon when someone should have been putting out wards. well, we should have been clearing jungle top. One person should have been doing that, or two should have been doing that. Three could have got dragon, and then we wouldn't have had to go blind into the bush, and we wouldn't have had to face check. That was what the issue was. It was actually 3 minutes earlier, right? So when you're doing a review, or when you're thinking about responsibility, do take responsibility for that fight, but ask yourself, okay, so what would have been how could we have won that fight, or how could we not have lost that fight, right? And sometimes it's like, well, being more, having your positioning better, or a better alignment or collaboration or whatever. Well, a lot of the time it's just don't be in the brush at that moment. Don't walk into river at that time when their power spikes are up and yours aren't. Right, just stay away from that area. Go and do something else. Right, there's other things you could have taken, and so you just rewind the clock to play the perfect game, and that can be a helpful thing. Not again to beat yourself up, but to say, right. So then the next thing, as we got into a lot, was, okay, guys, next time, what will you do? And make a note of it, write it down, and then that then becomes your learning goal for the next game or the next few games when you get your chance to apply that. Is like, this time I'm going to try this.
I actually recently really struggled with that with some of my coaching clients, Jono, because I'm a really big proponent of the early game. I literally have a whole show called Your First Jungle Clear, where it's like you're making these mistakes that are just like, you need to fix these first. Don't even worry about minute 20, because we need to fix these first. But what I find has happened, especially I had specifically one of my higher elo players, is that they, as you use the word, they're trying to play a perfect game, and as soon as they make that mistake, they basically just think in their mind, just give up. It's like, oh, the game's like over now because I have to play perfectly to win the game. And it got into this negative loop, and we were aware of it, but it's like, it was so difficult to break it for some reason. It's like, if we're making these, because usually we're making the same mistakes over and over again in League. That's very normal,
100%. So
and that's frustrating.
Wait, but then make the mistake. So deliberately make the mistake. So if you're doing a wave clear, let's say he's clearing his camps, right? Is it a he?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it'll just be stuff like a fire or a skirmish.
So say, right. So I want you to deliberately just miss that camp.
Okay.
What do you mean miss that camp? Miss it now. Walk past it, right? And just deliberately make a mistake, right? I'll just say, right, you're gonna now only kill. What are the gromp? I can't remember.
Gromp, wolves, raptors, krugs, raptors.
What are the chickens? The raptors.
Raptors,
right?
yeah.
So don't clear all the raptors. I'll make a mistake. And it's like, right, now the game is, how do you still win? That's the game.
Got it. Yeah.
Right? So we allow ourselves to lose. And this is really difficult for most players, right? Because it's just, remember me showing Shern, when Shern was getting killed, I think it was 2018, and he just kept getting killed. Just like, Shern, what the hell? And he had that time when I think we were up against the Chiefs or Simon. I think he got killed 9 times in one
Simon
game.
Swiffer, by the way, who we did the interview with, for those viewers that don't know, before our first guest. Go on, Jono.
So, and it's like, he just got killed 9 times. Like, Shern, just get yourself killed, mate. Go out and get killed. Right? And just do the negative. It's like, why would it? It's like, well, you're doing it anyway, so let's make it deliberate. Right? Let's at least set ourselves.
It does change it when you're doing it deliberately. It changes it, because it's like you're getting ready for it, and then you're already thinking about what's next. Because I'm gonna do it, right? It's like I'm gonna die.
The lesson that, and I'm not just being facetious, right? It's like it is a game. You strive for perfection, but you embrace that possibly, but in a competitive game, you will never get a perfect game, right? Ever.
That's right.
I've never seen one, right?
No,
and it's like, and then you go back and look at the best players, the person that you're aiming for. So you've got your picture of challenger or even pro, right? And you're pushing yourself out that way. It's like, well, let's watch his game. Let's look at what mistakes he makes. But also, not only what mistakes he makes, but how the hell did he come back from that? How the hell did G2 come back from that? How did we lose to Fnatic that week? Jesus Christ, it's just, and again, it comes back to decisions that were made, 5 minutes earlier or whatever. And so there's always a thing, but it's like, well, okay, so now I'm a disadvantage with my opponent. Now, ideally, you're playing your best, your opponent's playing your best, and they're a bit better than you, so you've got to strive really hard to catch up and to take them on. But if that kid can't come back from, it's really, it's not the clear that he needs to focus on. It's his mindset, right? It's like, well, actually, it is never, the best teams, it's never over. And I can tell you, having seen these teams, some of these teams backstage are genuinely, the best ones are like that. And they're always thinking about How can we get back into this? We can still get back into this and stuff, and this is not over. And I remember we were playing so 2019 Worlds. We're playing an American team, right? This is on the reverse sweep day, right? And it's going really badly, like just disastrously. And Joey's saying, "I'm feeling sick. I feel sick." We're backstage, right? And I'm thinking, this isn't physical sickness. This is emotional sickness because he's just seeing this game. And the thing is that the draft was they pulled out this draft choice that totally like caught us off guard, right? Just totally blew Joey out of the water, and blew all the players out of the water as well, right? I can't remember what it was now. Anyway, and then when I spoke to Hilly about it a while ago, and he said, John, that was our, and I said, I said, you did so well to come back from nearly losing to the Americans. He said, John, that was the best game of the day. He said that was our best performance. He said, and I think they took it to 50. It was a crazy game, mate. But it was we messed with, like, the draft was off, right? It's like when we were, Curtis, we explored with not making the wrong draft, but making a challenging draft. And one thing that Daylor was always really good at on Fnatic, and it would always make it a challenging draft, right? But it's always winnable, right? And most drafts, unless I drafted, then most of them are winnable, right? The question is, how can you focus on what you can do versus what you can no longer do? And that's where that kid needs to focus his time and energy.
I think that's a really awesome tip. I never thought of it like that.
I want to get back to quickly the SoloQ thing. And because Curtis actually said that was interesting, and you have a really big, positive view of SoloQ, Jono. But we talk about in the podcast, like we have to address this, Curtis, because we think SoloQ. We think SoloQ actually hinders improvement. Do we have a negative view on SoloQ?
Yeah.
But that got me thinking as well. Is that
I have a massive negative view on it.
Maybe. I mean, Jono views it in a very
no.
Positive light.
So the question is, no. I mean, how can it, guys? This is League of Legends, right? So let's look at under what conditions might SoloQ be helpful, and under what conditions could it be a total waste of time. Right?
It's specific to the player. I think there are some players that would benefit a lot from it in certain situations.
So what situations could it work?
Well, Nathan, can you mute your mic?
Oh, sorry.
Well, from what you said, I think players who need a little bit of emotional support, or they need a voice, they need someone to... I would say, actually, what you were saying, I think it's a great tool to build confidence, baseline confidence, someone with you. Because, as we know, SoloQ by yourself going into a game, because I actually had this question here by someone saying how he feels like... He says this, how do I get over accept the reality that ultimately I can't really control my teammates, so that I can actually just stop blaming them and blame all these other external factors? Like, how does he deal with that? How does he deal with that thought process?
Okay, so one of the things...
This can help that.
So 100%, when I'm thinking about SoloQ, I was thinking about one player in particular who needed support. Right, and they had emotional challenges, right, and another person that they could play with, and that would have taken away the issues or a lot of them that they were complaining about, right? So I totally get that. The other thing that you need to get, and this is one of probably the most, is that the very best players it all comes down to, it's the greatest team game, and at some point to get there, you have got to be willing and able to go 1v9. Right, and that's the most exciting thing when you see that happening at a high level, right? And just like this guy's he's on a different level. It's one of those things where someone, like a LeBron just pops off and he does a 50-point game, or he just approaches some. I really like college football, right, and American football, and I love the college level because you see games where a young man, just takes over the game. And there was one I got into it when I was watching Cam Newton playing for Auburn. Right, and he was supernatural. If you watch some of his college games, the difference between him and everybody else, it was like a man playing. It's like me playing against under-13s rugby, right? And he was just better in every single way. It was like it's like seeing a superior human being and just being down from some planet of perfection.
Yeah.
And it's like, as a player, you got to be able to go 1v9 and everything's shit. You've had a shocking early game and you still come through and win, right? So they're the games. It's like, well, that's the thing when you're on your own. And it's like, and you've got to be able to rely on yourself. And I think that's one of the things that when we look at and we reviewed, what made a great player is they have to be willing and able to do that. They can't, and also, and thinking, if all my teammates are trash, and I'm using that word advisedly, then I can still win, and I'm still gonna win because that's my nature.
And what's interesting, and it just popped up then, if you were to join, let's just say this player is someone struggling with that sort of issue where, they get impatient, they think it's always their teammates, their issue, that sort of thing. What it can actually do, Jono, I'd be interested if you agree with this, it can actually bring it back onto you. Because if you're duo with someone who's maybe someone who's going to be relatively truthful and someone you've got a decent relationship with and is going to get into the review with you, you're going to get exposed. You are going to get exposed. And what it can actually do is, rather than everyone else is bad and it's unfair for me to take responsibility for all these other people's actions. When you're duo, the way the matchmaking works, it's one duo versus another duo. So the games are generally a bit harder. You actually have to have a long-term duo partner in order to make it worth it. Because if you're versing a long-term duo partner and they've been joining for like 6 months together, they're going to be... The level of play that they're going to be at is going to be much higher. So what I'm getting at here is you are going to get outplayed more if you aren't on the ball. If you play duo queue and you don't play well, the game's going to be a whitewash. Because they're going to be a duo bot lane, they're going to be a mid jungle, they're going to gank you 1,000 times, you're going to die. So I think for the guy, Bluefrost asked this question. He's like, how can I get across that ability to help accept the reality that you can't really control your teammates? And yes, you're gonna how to get across blaming them.
100%. And it's the whole difference is that, well, you can't control them, and he's absolutely right. So what causes influence? How could he influence his teammates in a positive sense, right? And he can start with, who influences me when I'm playing? Who do I look to? What tells me that this guy's worth listening to, or I should ignore that person? And then making sure that the stuff that he sends out and the stuff he does is on the influence list, positive influence list, because you are on your own. Now, the thing that I like duo queue is that it does add a layer of complexity to the game. And it's like you then have to start looking at the map, and you'd have to start working together more closely, which is a prelude to the full team game, right? About how are we going to win, rather than how I'm going to win. Just give me all the resources and I'll 1v9 it. Is actually, well, how can we win as a team and how can we be better? So that, for me, what you just described there about, well, actually, if you are in a duo, you have to be better. Then that, for me, is a reason to do it, because it's like you need to be taking on those challenges. And also, the other thing you look at as well is how could you negatively impact the relationship of the duo that you're opposing, right? So you find out on that, who do you need to break up so that you can stop them working together, which is exactly what you've got to do in game, right?
Yeah, so I guess the counter argument, and in the situations I wouldn't recommend duoing, is if maybe you don't have that 1v9 aspect, or you're not really competent enough as an individual where you're struggling to manage your own lane, and maybe you're not up to scratch, or you haven't got that champion mastery.
Well, there's some cases, Curtis, where some players refuse to play without a duo queue.
And they just rely only on
and
the
then
duo.
they become reliant on the duo queue.
That's my biggest fear with these duos, is that, say you're a mid laner and you only duo with a jungler. What actually happens over time is that they can rely on X piece of information from their jungler. So instead of being the sort of player that is able to see that for themselves, they have to rely on that from their jungler.
I'm really glad you brought this up, mate, because what we guys, and this answers quite a few of the questions that came through, right? Is how do I transfer learning, right? So this was the question I think that we got quite a few times, was how do I transfer learning from the game to life, right? But this is actually, if I've got a positive relationship with a jungler, I play mid, and I've got a positive relationship with the jungler. What is it? Can I get granular about what is it about that relationship that makes it effective? And get beyond, we trust each other and everything else. It's specifically what you were saying. What information does that jungler give me at these minutes, and what do I need to know for this matchup, right? And also, how is my communication with my jungler so I give them plenty of time to get to where they need to be to get the gank off or whatever.
And this can expose your weaknesses. And this can even show what you're great at. Because like it's like, oh, if he covers these areas for me, this can allow me to shine because now I can all in all my strengths. Maybe my laning phase, but maybe my trading and my CSing, my lane positioning is great, but my warding and my my jungle tracking maybe isn't up to scratch, or my jungle tracking just isn't up to scratch yet.
100%. And getting
And you can identify that. You can actually identify what's going wrong. So when you do go into SoloQ, you know where to direct your focus. You know why. You can use your dual partner as a sign, as an indicator. Red, this is an alarm. This area, what he's compensating for you, this is where you need to direct your attention towards.
I mean, and you can, if you're working with a mate, right? Let's say you meet somebody and you can work together and you've got really good synergy, right? It's what you then look at doing is and you can start competing with each other on who can have the best win rate when you're not playing with each other, right? And make it a competition, right? And so it's like, so then you can fight to who's carrying whose sorry ass, right? And so it's like you make it so that you're not dependent on each other. But the other thing you then look at is say, how could I be an even better duo partner for you, right?
How can I be a better teammate?
As a jungler, it's like, what do you want from your mid lane, right? How can I help you to really deliver and achieve your outcomes? And even, you know, as a gamer, if you're like, look, what do you want? Where do you want to grow? What do you want to achieve? You know, how can we have more fun and enjoyment? Those kind of things. And then you think, well, okay, so if I've got a scratch relationship, I'm going into SoloQ. Then how can I then go back to the functional behavioral stuff that I want from the jungler? What does this jungler like most from his mid lane, right? So can I ask when I'm in, we're going into, we're in lobby or we're just spawning and I'm messaging the jungler, say, what do you want from me, mate? How about, I'm thinking of doing this. Would you like me to do that? Would that help you? And then you're reaching out. And again, this is where you can take responsibility, right? Is it you go first in the relationship? Is that you reach out to them, and also then it can gauge then the response you get back from that jungler will help you gauge what standard that jungler is, right? Because if you think, well, if you say that and I say, oh, do you know what, mate, I appreciate that, but what I'd really love you to do is X, and you think that's genius, mate. Okay, right. So now we're on this. Or he'll say, well, I would rather you did this, and you think, well, that's low level stuff, mate. That's Diamond 3 stuff. Right, and we're going for challenges, so this is going to be a tough game. So then you've got to compartmentalize the impact of your jungler.
But this is just so different to the way people view teammates in SoloQ. It's like the way people view teammates in SoloQ is like, I already go into this game hating every one of my teammates, and if they do something good, it's I hate this guy less. Like I already hate this guy. That's all it is. It's not like, and you make such a good point because. The way I view mid lane in SoloQ and the way I play, this is actually how I got, one of the big reasons I got rank 11 this year in Challenger.
Congrats, mate.
Thank you.
Still got it.
Yeah, still here, still got it. Got to put that one out there. Is how can I be of service to everyone else on my team? How can I make the game as easy as possible for them? Or how can I make their job easier? So is there a way I can play? Is there a way I can time my trades? Is there things I can do to make my jungler's life easier, my bot lane's life easier, or my top 100%. Lane's life easier? And it can be as small as, okay, I'm going to take the little loss in my laning phase where I'm going to save my TP, and maybe I lose 3 or 4 creeps for it. But if they get ganked bot, I can counter gank that, and we can turn that around, and I can prevent them from dying. Or my jungler, he's actually resetting right now, so I'm actually not going to trade at all and wait for him to come back onto the map, because if I'm heavy trading with my opponent right now, the chances that the enemy jungler can do something is much higher. I don't want to give the enemy jungle any way into the game. I want to only play when my jungler's ready to do something. I'll trade in a way very heavy and make sure there's a gank opportunity when my jungler's ready to gank, not when he's in base. So I can do things to influence and make the game as easy as possible. Now, in saying that, I think the reason I developed that was because I do respect everyone that's in high elo in my games. There is a respect. For me anyway, I respect the players that are in my elo. And I think that at the most fundamental level, what's happening, and this is where the ego really comes into play, you get a gold player, a platinum player, a diamond player. They have this thing in their mind thinking, fundamentally, I'm just better than these players. I don't deserve to be in this rank. These players around me are just all trash. And why do I need to help these people on my team? That's essentially what is going on. So
100%. Yeah.
You know, and it's so fascinating to me. It's just respect thing.
Let's just go. But it is, mate. There is a respect there, right? And also as well is why, like, if we were gonna go play footy, right? Why would I play with people I hated? Like, Jesus Christ, what kind of sick stuff is that? You need some therapy, right? Stop playing the game and go get yourself some therapy, because that's just messed up, right? But, right, if you think to yourself, how can I help my teammates? What that is doing is it's taking you from a solo laner to someone who looks at the map and someone who understands the game at a deeper level. So actually, if you can start the questions that you just phrased, or the things are, you know, my jungler's resetting, or it's like, well, you know what, I'm going to lose, like you say, I'm going to lose, you know, 3 CS on that one, but it's going to be worth it. When they're, you know, the powers either go to level 6 or whatever level there is that we've got to trade there, is that causes you have to have a broader awareness of the game, and that's what we're always looking for in competitive play and at the higher levels, and it's what you had at the highest level, right? So the difference is, you know, if you go to like the top teams, the kids have still got issues, but they're much more willing to work with other people if they respect them, right? And if they've got that respect, it's like, you know what, we're gonna win together, so you're good, and I know you make mistakes, but let's just get after it. And it's that greater awareness and recognizing that as a player, is that if you want to go as far as you can go, reach your highest possible level, then you must have greater game awareness. You must start to understand how this game actually works. And that's the other thing that I just loved about as a metaphor for life, as in, you start off with League of Legends thinking that it's all about 1v9 and it's all about SoloQ, when actually it's the greatest team game there is. Right, there isn't anything that comes anywhere close to how important it is to work as a team, and that, you know, what we talked about with shared views and having understanding strategies together and having alignment at that level, not just at a behavioural level, but actually in values of how to win and lose and how to come back from losses, how to help each other, all those things. It's really what you need to have in a top, you know, in a top business team. The thing that people I work with there, and thankfully now, if I'm now back in, you know, working with business teams, is that there aren't times when I can't talk to the team. Right, it's like we're not backstage and it's like, well, that's it now. Curtis, how was that? How was the draft? And then we sit and we just do their head in our hands. Oh my God,
that's the difference with the league.
You know, and it's like in life, it's like we can keep talking and we can keep helping each other.
NFL and football, American football, the coaches are like, they have...
Yeah, basketball, you can time out. You can be like, all right, guys, come here. It's like when in league, it's like they're on the rift.
You're shouting, right? And it's like, and also, shouting, I mean, there's mic linked between the coaching staff and the, you know, and the quarterback, right? So, and also it's like, well, one play and then you can have interaction. And it's like, well, actually, you know, and I love that about league, in that it's all about, and that's one of the things you know, it's like, well, distributed leadership is what it's all about. So you have to coach. You can't instruct in League of Legends. You have to coach.
You have to coach
because it's all about how to help someone to think more effectively and to solve problems creatively together when you're not there, which is the essence of management.
Yeah. Nathan, I think we should probably get
let's jump into some questions now. We've got a lot to get through. We'll get through
2 hours in. We're 2 hours in, and now we're getting to questions.
We won't do all of them. We'll do some of them.
All right, so let's see if this works here. All right, so we've got the walk-in library here. Top 3 books every SoloQ player should read. So this is from Micky, by the way. Micky Aspire. Top 3 books every SoloQ player should read. Let's start with that one. What's your recommendations here, Jono?
That's my first one.
So that's Art of War, Sun Tzu. Again, we have to name these out there, Jono.
But that's
Spotify.
Yeah, this is the Denmark translation of the Art of War.
And it actually breaks it down.
Yeah, so this is that's the first one. The other thing was, I mean, when someone asked me that question, it's like, well, what's your interest, right? So do we know anything about this?
No.
This guy. Okay, so if he's got, so let's just look at his other questions, right? So how to translate short-lived motivation to constant discipline workflow. So how relevant is an understanding of sports psychology and esports? Understanding people, understanding performance psychology. Sports psychology has always been a derivative of psychology. Right, it's not actually a thing. It just became a thing, and the book that you need. So the first book, I've got the second book in the series. Let's just hang on a second. Let me just move this. So here you go.
It's fine. We can take our time.
Right. So psycho-cybernetics, this is the book on psychology that created sports psychology, Maxwell Maltz, and so that's a fantastic book, and that helps you just around self-image, around, and that's it. I mean, it's like 45, 50 years old, so you may even get it on PDF now, but that's a terrific book. The other one, when you're thinking about sports psychology and teams, I would think about that, because that is really how do we work together under pressure. What books would you have, Curtis, on the best ones on teams that we got into?
I mean, for me, I personally, okay, I think Thinking Fast and Slow, even though it's a popular one, I mean, I think it's quite valuable. But for me, what I usually recommend, though, for most SoloQ players is actually even How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's just like, because you're just dealing with people, and I think that if you're in a team environment, How to Win Friends and Influence People is actually very valuable. If you're a SoloQ player,
this is a really good one. Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits, yeah,
That's another good
really
one.
good one.
I know
Yeah.
it's I know you've recommended that before. I heard that.
I actually really like the this one.
So what's that one there, Curtis? I can't see it properly.
This one,
That's
Intelligence.
intelligence.
This
okay,
one
I should know.
actually really influenced my coaching philosophy. This book and the Art of War. This one was a really good one.
Well, I mean, the other one I recommended to you was Warfighting, right? The U.S. Marine Corps. So that's intelligence. So this is the U.S. Marine Corps Warfighting.
That's also very good.
If Micky, if you work in business, and if you got thinking about business culture, this strangely is the best book on business culture that there is.
War
It's only
fighting.
short, right? It's only short, but they're all about culture. And that's the thing that transformed my practice, was getting into people who work in life and death situations, and war fighting was the best thing. But I think that's it. Yeah. So there's a really good books on that. If you give us any more information about your real interest or where you're at right now, then we can find some more. But the other thing around that Curtis was saying around, how to win friends and influence people, it's just stuff on how to be better, But Thinking Fast and Slow, read it as a summary, because it's a great point. It's really good stuff. But there's a lot of the guy's a fabulous academic. I think he's won has he won the Nobel Prize?
I think he did.
I think he might have done, right? So it's super clever guy, but a lot of it is like, well, a 15-minute summary is really good on that one. And that's the other thing with with most of those books. I think with Warfighting and Psycho-Cybernetics, get the summary and then decide if you want to take it any further.
And there's the last section of this one here. When it comes to improvement, how to translate short-lived motivation to constant disciplined workflow.
Okay, so some of that it's all about emotional self-regulation. If he's struggling with discipline and challenge, there's also translating from short-term dopamine hits of winning games to long-term satisfaction of getting better. And so in that sense, it's all about controlling your comparisons. Micky is focusing on looking back and seeing how far you've come, and then projecting that into the future and say, right, I'm going to do that in slightly less time this time. I'm going to do it actually going back to the gamer. I'm going to do it with more growth, more I'm going to keep achievement the same, more meaning, engagement, and better relationships. And so in that sense, your gamer is really about internal motivation rather than getting pumped up for the one game. He's like, no, this is what I'm here to do, right? And also, if you want to go pro, or let's just say that you're just a really committed gamer, is actually just taking time away from the game so that you feel energized when you come, and making that for you. Maybe it could be when you're making it more enjoyable. Not achievement, but just you want to make it more enjoyable. And some games, some nights, you actually just do duo queue because you want to help somebody, or you just want to play with a mate and you just want to have fun, because it's just a lot of fun. I know quite a few guys that pro players that have mates that they've played with, and then that they're not pros, but they just had a really good fun, and they had a Smurf account when they were playing, so that they could just have a lot of fun with that kind of thing. So changing it up there for you, I think that could be the thing there that helps you be more disciplined. But that is the bomb, and focus on consistency of your practice. So don't worry less about being absolutely on fire or doing this or that. Just say, you know what, I'm going to focus on being average, right? Look at what your average is and then say, right, I'm just going to maintain average, right? And that's all you've got to do. So for example, with, when I'm doing the heart math stuff, what I tell people is all you've got to do is be consistent, right? That's all you literally, all you've got to do is the work. Just do the work and the improvements will come. And so in that sense, I think have we got the question about process, trust the process?
Yeah, we do have that one coming up. Yeah.
Is there any way that could come next?
Let's just quickly find that.
And just tying on from that last part of that question, I was reading something recently that spoke about, don't just look at your highs and your strengths. Look at your losses. Like, how do you lose? So one thing that I've realized as well with some of my lower elo clients, what I look for is, okay, to see some improvement, how are you dying? Because there's a good death and there's a bad death. Yeah. Are you dying because you're pushing your limits and you maybe in your mind you thought this was the correct play, so you went for it and it just didn't work out? I'd say that's a pretty good death. But are you dying? Well, are you dying because you just weren't focused, you got sloppy, and then you just like weren't tracking the jungle and you just died randomly? Like, there's a good death and a bad death. So look at your deaths and look at what's your lowest point. How low are your lows?
Well, do you know, and taking that to the next for the guys pushing up to challenger was that an appropriate death? So if you take a low probability play, but you're already behind, right? So I mean, Nathan, we've talking about your jungler that now is deliberately set himself back, so he's got to take slightly riskier plays. Is he doing that when he needs to, right? But when he is ahead, is he then just taking it, just being slightly more conservative and just making sure that he's not taking he's not just taking 50-50s, because this game's already won. And it's when someone you see players get bored. And it's like, well, mate, the game was
Let's just fight. Yeah, they literally just like, they get bored and like, let's just fight. Like, the game's over.
The game was over, and then and it wasn't over because you just couldn't keep winning, right? And it's like, well, do you know what? And I think that's one of the things. It's like when you get into people's motivations, is that you want the challenge, and so you want it to be difficult. And it's like, and then when it is difficult, they complain about their teammates being trash. It's like when you become a good player. Every game's going to be 1v9, right? Except when you get to Korean SoloQ, and that's a different thing entirely, right? But everything's going to be 1v9 because that's the nature of SoloQ, right? It's trying to get a balanced 5 players versus 5 players. So you're going to have to carry everybody. So enjoy it, right? It's meant to be like that.
All right, this is the one about trusting the process here. So I'll just read this out, Jono, just for the listeners on Spotify.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So Nathan and Curtis have talked frequently about trusting the process of focusing on your individual performance and right or wrong, acknowledging that some games are unwinnable just as some are won without you. With LP gain and loss being visible immediately after a game, a lot of people are incredibly focused on that immediate result. It's a very uncomfortable mindset to get into. The majority of my low elo friends find the ego protection of blaming their teammates and making excuses easier than accepting their own actions and performance as the determining factor in their games. How can we trust in the process help others build that trust? How can we, people who trust in the process, help others build that trust? How can we help people through that mental transition to a more focused improvement mindset rather than focusing on the immediate result?
Okay, so the first thing he can do is, Patrick, is you can, if you're playing with these guys, then you demonstrate that. And so win or lose, your emotional state is mostly the same, right? What you focus on is if it was a great game, right? And some cracking fights, some great strategy, and it was just brilliant, right? The other thing to remind your low elo friends is that what they're missing in blaming teammates and excuses is they've got to also blame the draft. If they want to go pro, they've got to blame the coach and the draft choices, which is one of my experiences.
Okay, it's not what you want to be doing, but go on, John.
But the other thing, joking aside, is to ask the guys think about the game for them, and you can introduce the acronym. Or just ask them, say, what would make it more fun, right? It's like sometimes if you want to just shoot the breeze and just blame the teammates and then that's it. But if you want to get better, then ask yourself, how does this serve you? So you're blaming other people for the losses. It's like, if you really want to get better, how does it serve you? And just get them to be open to doubt about whether or not that something else might also work. And you said, let's just try 5-10 games like that, and 5-10 games just thinking about your own performance and how you worked with everybody else. Not whether they were good or bad or anything like that, but how well did you work and help other people? And how did you get help when you deserved it? Because that's the other thing, is that at low elo, often people don't have the game awareness to realise that they ought to just be channeling everything through top now or through mid or whatever, because that's the only way they're going to win, is they don't have the awareness. And so in that sense, it's like, well, actually, they can't help it, right? So that then is that they don't need to trust the process. What they need to trust is be open to doubt that the current process that they're following, and their process is protect ego, blame others, and take no responsibility for my actions. How does that deliver performance for them, right? The other thing with trusting in a process is that if your process is right, it will deliver results quickly, especially if you're low elo, right? You will shoot through literally like strapping a rocket to your arse and taking off. It'll
Great
be that
analogy,
fast,
John.
right? If you get a better process, it will be that different. And so you say to someone, hey mate, I've been working on a new process. What I suggest, how about you try 10 games with my process and 10 games with your process, and see which one delivers more results, but also more growth, more achievement, more meaning, more enjoyment, and better relationships with others,
more
a group
fun.
of players, right?
And oh, did you mute your mic, Nathan? And I think Jono made a really good point about lead by example. If these are your friends, what I would even do is go to the extent, and I try to do this sometimes when I'm in the Discord call, in my Discord, to say, if I have a rough game, I literally don't say nothing about how my team led to that loss. It's straight away, there was this moment here where this is what I did, but I should have done this, and it led to this. And then I'll even ask myself questions. How could I have prevented this result from happening? Like, I'll even step through what I go through. What's my thought process? And if these guys are your friends and you're going to do this again and again and again, you're going to be, like Jonah said, you're going to be getting results. They're going to be seeing you, listening to you do this sort of thing. And then slowly over time, you could start asking them some high quality questions. Hey, Max, how did you contribute to that mid-jungle 2v2? How could you have played that mid-jungle 2v2 better? Was there a way you could have prevented that mid-jungle 2v2 happening? Did the jungler even know that you didn't want this fight? Could you have pinged earlier? Was there something you could have communicated at the beginning of the game? Let's ask better quality questions. How could you have prevented X from happening? Or how could you have contributed to a better result coming about in a way? So lead by example, man. And I think that'd be
And do you know, and one thing given is one other thing with this, Patrick, is that you're thinking about your mates here and you're trying to help your mates out. And so what you also need to make sure of is that the people who you call mates deserve you as a mate, right? So if they are not the kind of people who you want to be, then you need to have a conversation with them eventually, right? Maybe not now, I don't know what's going on for them, but it could also just be, do you know what? It's like you've got mates and they're not that bothered. And that's fine, right? They're not that bothered about the game, but they're bothered about other things. Right, but you're bothered about the game because you're listening to Curtis and Nathan, so you do care. So what you're going to have to do if you want to get on is eventually you're going to have to find other people to play with who care the way that you do, and that's the thing that you need to honor in yourself, is that you make sure that people around you are caring about you the way that you care about them.
I was just going to say there for this one, I love what you say there, Jono, the word serve. How does this serve even my best interests? Like, it's just a simple question. How is this behavior of blaming my teammates, making excuses, not accepting my own actions, how does this help me achieve my goal, help me improve? Such a simple question. But it's like, how does this serve me? And again, they also need to, and I like that, Jono, they're going to think, how's this affecting Patrick? Like this, he might just not be enjoying it. And again, like you need to have an honest conversation potentially with them about like, they're potentially ruining your League of Legends experience.
Yep, I do this all the time with Nathan at home where he leaves the bathroom door open. And I have to keep telling him every time how much he's ruining my life.
Well, you see, because you still haven't convinced me how that ruins your life specifically well enough. So I always put it down to you just being a pansy. You're like, oh, I'm too hot, Nathan. It's a whole room of aircon. So.
All right, Jono, wait. Actually, before we go in here, I got to get this.
Oh, jeez.
So we're in a small apartment, right? Where there's 3 doors, where the aircon faces 3 doors. One's my bedroom, one's Nathan's bedroom, and one is this big bathroom sliding door. In terms of being efficient with the usage of the air conditioning, and I don't want to pay for the air conditioning to cool down his bathroom, I say, okay, why don't we keep the bathroom door closed so the air conditioning goes into my room and your room? And he leaves it open every single time. Is that just not a fair ask, just to close the bathroom door behind you? When we have the air conditioning?
It sounds fair in theory.
In a hot apartment? In a very hot apartment? Like, is that not fair?
Well, do you know what? You guys were in, I remember that room you had in that apartment. I think it had no air conditioning, right? And it was like 40 degrees or something ridiculous, right? So you used to hot, right?
That's
so
right.
It's like, well, just decide, mate. Just, how important is this, right? It's like let's say you've got a friend who's got some mental health challenges in that he can't close a door, right? If you care about him, and just say, do you know what, mate? I care about you too much. It's like with, Patrick, maybe with his mates, it's like, do you know what, guys? I care about you too much to make this an issue. I'm just going to let it go. For the good of our relationship, I'm going to let
I think Curtis should let this one go, I reckon.
I'm going to let you be
No,
mentally
I let go
right?
too much stuff. I let go way too much
so
stuff.
then talk about that, right? Rather than making this an issue. Can we move on to the next question? Because I'm now at
Yeah,
okay,
we'll keep going through it. All right, so this one's here from Jack.
Jack.
Hi, my name is Jack.
from
I'm
London.
Diamond 4 Midlander from London, Jono's hometown. I main Oriana and Twisted Fate. I often find when climbing that I can play with 100% focus throughout the day and play extremely well. I find that some aspects of my game improve dramatically, such as map awareness, mechanics, and many more. However, this is also reciprocated, where in a lot of days I'm unable to play at my best and often play laning phase terribly and fall behind. I used to think external factors may dictate how consistent I play day to day, so I created a schedule to which I play League every day at the same time and sleep for 8 hours every night. Despite the fact that every day I have the same dying urge at school to come home and play League, it feels like a matter of probability whether I feel disappointed that I didn't play better. I've been wanting to ask this question for a long time now, and I thought this was the right time since I think it would be good to get advice from a psychological expert, as I feel as though I can't be the only one who has issues with this. Thanks for doing this podcast. Been a huge fan.
So first of all, big shout out to homeboy Jack. I'm in London as well, just outside. Secondly, mate, your awareness of the factors that are in or out of game are just terrific. So keep at it, right? This is one where you definitely need to trust the process. And also, I think what you're now doing is you're proving our point that in game and out of game are very close. There is no out of game, right? So what you need to do is you need to get curious. Right, instead of worrying about whether I'm going to make it on or I'm going to climb again, is get curious, like Sherlock Holmes, mate. So think like you're on Baker Street and you're getting curious about this. This is absolutely fascinating, right? Because you're making stuff more stable. You've got some level of intention that's the same. You've got the same dying urge at school to come home and play League. So I would first of all say, when you're at school, please stay focused and get your education, because it can be quite important. But then the other thing is look at other factors. So you've got sleep there. You don't mention food. So what's your diet like? But also as well, what's your emotional state? You may be that you're dying to get home, and that's fair enough. But what are your interactions like at school? On the days where you're absolutely cooking on gas playing a game, what happened in that day emotionally at school? And then what happened on the days when you play really badly and you just can't concentrate? So I would look at the broader factors, but just get curious, mate. Write down diary entries, and you're going to struggle to pick out what are the factors early on, but you will get there. So just stay curious with it and fascinated.
That's a good one, and I think that to try and get through another one, it's a quick one for me. When I was at university, even when I was at school, I found that I could not play well not play well during any game when I knew that I had to do homework or study. Like, if I had the mental baggage where I knew that after I played these 2 or 3 games, I had to study or I had to do homework, I couldn't stay focused. So what then I ended up doing was creating a schedule at university where I did all of my work at uni. So when I came home, I was just game time. There's nothing else I have to do. I've done all my work. I've done all my study. It's all out of the way. Now it's game time. And that allowed me to have a lot of clarity when I played. So that could be an area as well that you might want to experiment. How busy are you on those days? Are you procrastinating on those days where you're not performing?
And you know, and for this guy as well, I think it could be, given the stuff that he's doing already, is if he started to focus on the 15 minutes before playing and just created, and just again, so look at when I'm at my best, what do I notice about the 15, 30 minutes before getting into game? And not only what your mindset is, and that could be that you've got a great mindset, but actually, how do I create that? And just start to run some experiments and tests on how can I censor myself, and just do a bit of breathing, and there will be a link on this video to heart math and just some stuff, but it's very simply just breathing rhythmically and deeply and getting your oxygen. The other thing would be thinking about, well, are there some relation? How's it everything at home when I'm playing, right? And when I get into game and it goes well, is that because we're getting on at home? Is that going well? Is there some challenges there? And it's like with Curtis saying, are there other distractions that are causing you to pull out? Now, it could be there's nothing you can do about some distractions. There's some challenges that you just face. But so what you then need to focusing on is getting into becoming more mindful about how you prepare and how you get into stuff, and that will help you at school, 100%. So it's a win-win on that one.
All right.
So let's carry on.
Moving on.
I'm going to do one more, Nathan. I think we can make this the last one.
Okay, I mean, I definitely want to do an extra one of the email questions we got. I mean, how much more? Do you have 10 minutes, Jono? Or?
Yeah, no problem, mate.
All right, cool. All right, we can potentially squeeze in. Again, we'll see how we go through here. All right, so this is from Rahul. I have a question. I'm not sure if it fully qualifies as psychological or not. Over the course of my life, I've been good at many things, mostly academic and before that cricket. People, teachers would always tell me I'm very good at X or Y. I feel like that got to me in a way that now I feel hesitant to even try something out because I know I will not be good at that thing. So instead of trying and failing, maybe improving later, I will just act like that doesn't matter and laugh it off. I didn't take note of this for the longest time, but during the lockdown, I was thinking about the things that matter to me and I'm good at. And honestly, I feel like the list is the same that it was 5 to 6 years ago. It feels like I have not grown or branched out at all during all these years, whereas others have gone on to try other stuff, and I can't help but feel like if life was a race, I'm behind the line that I started at originally. This bit here is a bit more league related. This is the reason why I have started playing mid lane instead of my main roles, jungle and support, because I knew I am bad at laning and CSing, so I always tried to not be in a position where I would have to do those things. I feel like this exercise has been a little better in making me realize that I'm capable of a lot more than what I think. Do you think this is an effective exercise in breaking the mold that I've become? What other things should I do? My initial reaction to this is this intelligence leading to avoidance? Like he just procrastination here because he's like, well, like I'm smart, I'm really too good at this.
What Rahul has just described is a perfect description of Carol Dweck's fixed mindset and how it develops in a young person. So let's just say Rahul's a bit of a star, right? And I'm using this language deliberately, right? It's like, oh, little Rahul, you're so good. You're so smart. You're so clever. You're so amazing. And little Rahul thinks, I'm not. It's like, I've worked really hard for that. It's like, I didn't get that because I'm special. I'm like, well, actually, I've worked really hard. But no, you're amazing, you're amazing. And then Rahul starts to think, hang on a second, I know I'm not amazing. And that was really difficult. And then you start to protect because you've got to stay amazing. And so instead of thinking, hey, mate, let's get on it, it's like, you're amazing because you're willing to try stuff and you're the fastest learner in the house. And I'm so impressed with that. Let's go and learn something new, which is what you were amazing at. Then what you've now got into this habit of is thinking I have to be amazing in order to get acceptance and to get positive feedback in my environment. So what you need to get into, mate, is Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K, Carol Dweck's mindset. And I'm sure there's a TED talk that she's done because it's legit taken over psychology. And just being willing just to give yourself this opportunity and remember that you overachieved or you did really well because you were great at learning. And if you were great at learning, then it means you can be great at learning again. So absolutely challenge yourself and push out and start, and focus on improving.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Fixed mindset, and you've got to start developing that growth mindset. And I think moving to mid lane is not easy, especially if you're a jungler or you're a support player. And I think that's a great little challenge to set yourself. And I think that there's plenty of content on my channel that's not easy to do, and there's a lot of work to be put in. But it seems like you're a very intelligent guy that has the ability to learn, like Jono said. And there's no doubt in my mind, if you put in the effort, you stay focused, you stay disciplined, then you can make some progress. And it seems like you have made a bit of progress too. So yeah, spot on, Jono.
All right, next one here is from Joseph. How can I improve in remaining present while playing games or dealing with any other high-stress situations? It is easy to fall into conditioned reactive responses. Is it possible to avoid this while simultaneously thinking about the game and being focused? How can I improve in remaining focused and present?
That's a really great question, Joseph. So staying present, you talk about being in game, but why don't we take it out of game? Why don't you spend a day focusing on being present out of game and just noticing stuff? Being curious and noticing. And one of the weirdest things, and I know there's reason for this, but we might not get into it, is try smelling for a day. I don't mean you smell, like go out and have, don't take a shower. What I mean is when you go outside, sniff. What can you smell? Right, and if you're in a room or going out or whatever, or you maybe want to check your room, if you're trapped in lockdown, then you can do that. One of the things is opening up your senses, and then have a day of seeing, right, and have a day of listening. Go and get yourself to a park and just sit on a seat and see what you can hear, and just notice and focus on being present in that situation. And then the other thing is if you're concerned about conditioned reactive responses, do different stuff. If you normally go to work or school in one route, then take a different route. If you normally eat one sandwich or two sandwiches, then try a different sandwich and make yourself open to new things. And then the next thing is focus in on what are, when you are present, and focus on being more present and noticing what's happening as it goes on around you, and then get into it. Now, the conditioned reactive responses, it's actually conditioned or unconditioned response, or an unconscious response, is really what top performance is all about, right? So it's like being able to act without needing to think, but still acting wisely. That's the essence of thinking fast and slow. So if you're saying conditioned reactive and it's not particularly helpful, then that's really where you need to strengthen your whole of your game, in which case try the gamer thing and focus on growth and enjoyment for a couple of days when you're practicing and when you're playing, and just think, well, how can I have the most fun playing League of Legends tonight? And just do some, set yourself crazy challenges or just whatever it is that you might want to be able to do.
Great. Anything there from your perspective, Curtis? Staying present?
I mean, one thing I would say is that if you do fall into some, let's just say, to use an example, let's just say you get killed. You shut down, you get killed, or even maybe someone says something in the old chat that just pisses you off, and you have your classic response where maybe someone says something and your default response is to just type in old chat. Or maybe it's to whatever it is. I would say my biggest advice, what I tend to tell people to do, and I got this from Jono, is just when you're in base, when you're dead, take a few deep breaths. It can be literally 2 or 3 seconds. Take a few deep breaths. And then, what's next? What do I need to do next? How do I need to play these waves? What's my next power spike? What is the next actionable thing you need to do? And then bring your attention to that, to use it as a bit of a distraction to what else is going on. I'd say that's what I usually recommend.
Nice.
All right, next
Nathan,
one is from
I
Observer.
reckon we get to the emails, man, Nathan. We gotta come on in. Jono.
I'd love to use Jono here to get, this is really good stuff to help our listeners. So it's up to Jono. Just let me know how much time you get, Jono, and we can stop soon. Anyways, this one here is from Observer. How to deal with large failures. For example, say a plat player at the start of the year sets their goal to the end of the season in Diamond. They then put in hundreds of hours of work throughout the year, but in the end they find themselves still in Platinum or maybe even in Gold, even lower when they started. This could also be asked for pro teams who fail in their seasons. How to deal with large failures?
Okay, so I would start off with a review of the process. So let's say you have yourself a goal, right? And let's say that you want to. So let's say with this example, right? So you're at plat and you want to reach diamond, right? So what you then want to do is by the end of the season you're in diamond. So specifically what level? But then you say, well, okay, so by the end of month 1, I will know I'm on track, that my process is working if these conditions are met. And I don't just mean achievement level. I mean, actually, you've spoken with someone or you've reviewed the difference between a plat player and diamond player, and you think, you know what, I'm thinking differently about the game. And whilst my results are not coming, my thinking is improving, or my mechanical skill, my ski S is slightly improved, and that's tracking upwards. So you measure where you ought to be, and you make sure that is. And if you're not where you need to be, and you think, well, do you know, okay, I'll give it another 2 weeks. And after 6 weeks, if you're still not making that kind of progress, and people around you agree that that's reasonable progress you should be making, then review your process. And this is the same for pro seasons. Now, the other thing I can tell you is there is no pain like esports pain, right? When we lost, like losing at Worlds and getting knocked out, I have not had professional pain like it. And the boys, when they got the pain that they went through, is that it took me a while to figure it out. And I think that there's nothing like esports pain, because when you lose a physical contest, let's say you're playing rugby, which used to be my game, then when you lose a major game, you are physically exhausted and you do not have the physical resources to feel really shit yet. That comes the week later when your injuries are repaired, and then you can feel depressed. Where playing at top level League of Legends, it feels like when you get to Worlds and you get knocked out, it feels like you've run into a wall. You remember that, Nathan, right?
I mean, we're all sitting in it's after the defeat, we go into that room and we all just sit in that just dead silence.
Just so painful. So the thing is that pain and loss is part of the game. And if you can't take that, then you're in the wrong game, because you're just going to get some serious pain with this game. But review your process, make sure, so if you got whatever your goal is, play it, track it back, and make sure that by the end of month 1, at the very least, if it's a year goal, the end of month 2, you are seeing progress and you're measuring that. And then you call someone in who knows more than you do about the process to say, hey mate, you need to do this, this, and this, and change it up.
All right. There's a really good email question here from James. Hey, Curtis, Nathan. First things first, huge fan of the podcast. Keep up the good work. Writing in with a question to discuss with Jonathan Brown, JB. Many performance coaches advocate for priming rituals to bring up peak performance mindset. Is there a ritual you would recommend for pro players before entering a game? What about for SoloQ players? I find that I have very hard time eliciting a state of lucidity, flow state, peak performance, and that regularly contributes to losses due to autopiloting. Curious if you have any advice on ways to improve my mindfulness through priming exercises or otherwise. Thanks, James.
Yes. So, James, thanks for that. There's some stuff we've already looked at. So what you need to get into is curiosity is, whilst it may have killed a cat, is absolutely crucial for a League of Legends player, right? Understanding, okay, so when you're at your best, what do you tend to do? And it could be actually your emotional state when you are at your highest performance, when you're not autopiloting, but you're focused, you're energized, you're looking at what's next, you're getting ahead of the game, all those kind of things. What is it that what's present when that's taking place, and what was present 30 minutes before that? And then you can start to develop your own process, right? Now, the other thing to be thinking about is if you start to, sometimes it sounds like you're autopiloting, you've been losing concentration, right? So one of the things that you can help, and pilots have this, or traders as well, is you have certain questions that you ask yourself, or points to note when it's like, well, if you have been killed, this is what I need to be look at. So look at some notes, say, right, next time I get killed, it's like, okay, so I'm going to look at these things. What's the situation here? And again, you're getting curious and you're getting interested. The other thing that you may want to be thinking about is to watch, get a good streamer whose gameplay is really strong, who's very good at describing what they're doing, and watch what they focus on. And that then can give you a totally different level, because one of the things is that we go around thinking that our level is okay, and if we get exposed to a genius and we embrace the possibilities that, well, actually maybe I can do something like that, and allowing them to be a genius and I'm not a genius, that's okay too, is to say, do you know what, they're doing all these other things, so I'm re-engaging my fascination with the game by noticing that they can notice 7 times the things that I do, or they notice things quicker. So that's the kind of stuff that I would get into on the priming stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Jono introduced this really awesome technique that he did with our players, Direwolves, which was he developed this thing called a picture of mastery, and that's kind of what Jono's talking about here. And get very specific. You can actually have categories within this picture of mastery. So you would have, what are all the traits that, if you were to envision a world-class, the best player in your role, in the world, what are the skills that they have in-game, out of game, in terms of teammate qualities? We're talking every single aspect of how you envision this world-class player. Have it written down. And sometimes having this sheet or this thing written out, this picture of mastery, can bring about that visualization and bring about just thinking about that can really get you primed and in the zone. And I would also say I have known some players they like to do like rough practice regimes heading into a game, whether it was the Lux bot drill that I talk about on my YouTube, or even just maybe you do 5. Jono used to talk about this before we went into scrims and direwolves. We would actually go into practice tool for 10 minutes and you'd get the players just do the exact same routine, because that's what we could do on stage as well. We had 5 or 10 minutes before our pro games would start on a weekend where we could go into practice tool and really warm up. It's less about what you do in practice tool. It's more about the consistency. It's like, okay, when I'm heading into this SoloQ block of 3 games, I've scheduled out my 3 games of SoloQ today. I'm going to prime myself that every single time I do this, to train my brain and thinking, okay, if I do my 5 minutes into practice tool before I head into SoloQ, my brain's going to know, my body's going to know, this is go time. This is ready. I'm going to have these 3 intense games no matter what. And the reason I'm actually quite passionate about this is because my friend has something similar with gym, where he's tricked his brain. So he has like a little bit of dark chocolate before he goes to the gym. Not because it has any effect on him. It's just whenever he has that dark chocolate, it reminds himself, this is a workout time. I'm going to push my body. You have to prime my body. I'm getting ready to go in. And it's been working really well for him.
What about music? Importance of music. Any thoughts on music in terms of priming? We did some work with music, Jono, didn't we, with dials?
Yeah.
For priming.
So one of the key things, that music can change your mood, but it can also remove distractions, right? So that's the other thing that you can get into, James, is just dealing with distractions. So yeah, 100% music's fabulous on that one, but just getting interested and just setting yourself a higher standard. The other thing to realize, it could be that you're just coasting a bit, and it could be that that's no problem with that. It's just to make the game more interesting for yourself. Just set yourself a higher standard, and just to say, I'm going to dominate more, or I'm going to focus on this part of the game, or I'm going to try and get pro level on my warding, or and just go deeper on stuff. That's the other thing that'll get you, because it could be that you don't need to prime. So because you don't need to prime, then you can coast. In which case, then you will have a trouble getting into this state of lucidity. If you look at flow states, one of the things that's demanded of best performance is a sufficient challenge. And it's sufficiently challenging to demand the best of you. And now you're up to that challenge, so you have got that the mastery that's demanded is the one that you've been building to, but it's one that pushes you to another level. It's really if you think about what Rahul was talking about and asking about, is realizing that he can do a whole lot more than he thought he could. I think that's one of the antidotes to autopiloting.
Well, we've got 4 questions left. If we can power through these. This one's from Noriaki. I hear Coach Curtis say all the time that League helps you better at League helps you get better at life. But is it true for the other way around? I'm trying to go pro, 19 years old, and I'm doing everything I can in order to optimize myself to be better at League. I find myself feeling as though if I can figure out and solve problems of myself, such as family problems and issues like commitment, then I can convert that to also being better at League. How true do you believe in better life equals better league? And is it relevant enough for me to spend time thinking about external problems, or should I just solely be using my 100% brain power to think about league? At least for now, I know it's unhealthy to not try to be the best person you can be.
I think you should have at least one day a week when you make no effort to be the best person you can be, Noriaki. At least one day a week, and you just be the person that you're being. Just be, right? Because it's just too much. Why have you always got to be something else, right? Just accept yourself, mate, and work on that. And I've said that it sounded a bit facetious, that didn't it? It's very hard to do that, right? So just again, be curious and embrace the possibility that you can accept yourself, and you don't have to be amazing. You don't have to be traveling anywhere or always going to go pro next year. You're still okay, right?
I mean, one other thing here is like, I mean, I don't know if I'm 100% interpreting the question correctly. Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong. Nathan, how do you interpret this question? Is it more if you...
Well, I think his question here, it's he's saying is helping improving other aspects of his life, and we've touched on this a lot. I mean, already. I think in this past 2 hours.
Is it going to help him get better at league?
Better at league, that's right. Like solving problems. Like maybe he's got mental baggage going into games. It's like some family problem or some life situation. I don't know.
I mean,
that's how I interpret it.
So can I come back in again?
Sure.
Of course.
The other thing, so sometimes better life equals worse league, right? So a lot of the reasons why we play video games is because we're unhappy, and it's a great distraction, right? And there's the real danger. There's a wonderful thing about gaming within that, because it can help us just to blow off some steam, and it can be a little bit toxic, and it's all okay, and we don't harm anybody, and that's all right. So sometimes a sign that your life's better is when you're not playing league that much, right? And you're playing league less because you're less driven. But if you're really interested if you want to go pro, then that really is getting into gamer and focusing on that. Now, the other thing, we've talked quite a bit in the podcast about working with others. So working with family members, for example, which is team, kind of a team member, and solving problems. And it's understanding more about the impact you have on a situation and the power that you have to change it and to influence it. So that's something that I would definitely focus on, especially if you're genuinely interested in going pro, dealing with relationship issues and being strong and protecting your boundaries and being able to fight for yourself. Very, very important at a pro level, right? I mean, it really is some of the stuff that at every level you've got to be able to defend yourself, and also as well find ways of working with people who can be quite challenging. Pro players are quite challenging people. But generally, I think that the better life equals better league. I said it could be that you're actually playing less league and you're more balanced. One of the things that Whippo was always really strong about, and genuinely this is a case for him, is he cares about his girlfriend massively, and it's very important for him to have a balance of something out of the game, right? And it's one of the things that can get a bit intense, really, is if all your mates are in league, then it can just be really difficult to have any kind of balance and any way of contextualizing losses or having a bad run or a difficult time in the game. If you've got mates outside of the game who just don't give a shit about what happens in game, they care about you, obviously, but they just don't care, then it helps you just to let go and then to come back fresh the next day. So that's something I would look at there as well.
All right, this one's from what? Oh, sorry, Wilderness. That's the thanks, Wilderness. So, hello. What is the best competitive mindset to have to reduce stress and maximize performance? Should high confidence come before realistic assessment of our situation? How can I develop the confidence to make plays I know are correct? I feel like I care too much about what my teammates think, and so I stifle my playmaking sometimes.
Do you want me to go first, Curtis? Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, Wilderness. So, caring about what your teammates think is terrific. What you need to make sure, though, is that you care about what you think, and you've got an opinion on that, right? And so you do consider what your teammates think, but you do care about what you think. So that's really important, and you play the way that you want to play, right? And sometimes it's like, well, actually, there can be a conflict, and if your teammates don't want to play that way, then find another team. really, if you can't get an agreement. As regards the best competitive mindset to reduce stress and maximize performance, there isn't one. It's really about what works for you, and that's a thing to get fascinated about. So we've got players that we've worked with that worked best when they were pissed off, and others who worked best when they were totally chill, like Zen master type stuff. And so you've got to get on in a team is you're working in a team where people trust everybody else to get to that competitive mindset, and we help each other to get to what works for you. High confidence in your ability to handle a situation and to recover from a situation going bad, I would say, is essential. That's one of the reasons why people often have unrealistic assessments of situations, is because they don't believe that they could recover from it being really bad. I think in game, one of the things that you can, it's a safe situation. It's a safe, even if you get demoted, it's literally not the end of the world. So you can have confidence that, you know what, if this shit happened, I can come back and I'll recover. And that's really the essence. We talked earlier about Carol Dweck and mindset. That's absolutely crucial to that. Developing confidence in make plays are correct is make correct plays, and remind yourself of that, and monitor it, and listen to take lessons from Nathan and Curtis, and get into, okay, well, I've made the right play there, and go back, and when you review your plays and review your games, just say, well, did I make the right play, and how trustworthy are my beliefs that I'm making the right play? And sometimes in new situations, when you get promoted, you can't trust your judgment, but that's the whole point, right? Is to get better and to take more, but just to review it, mate, and learn to back yourself. Now, what we could have taken from some of what you said is that you play with teammates that are not supportive. It could be, it may not be, and if so, then obviously ignore this section. But for those of you who do, then if you're making plays that are mostly correct, you're going to make some mistakes. That's the nature of the game. But if your teammates are not supporting you, then have a word with them. Try to get them to be more supportive. And if they're not, then find new teammates.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously he's probably coming from a SoloQ perspective here, Jono, where it's like he's getting 4 strangers. So, again, how we said that every time we get into game, we're just going into the possession with hating our teammates. So I think that's probably where he's coming from here.
Well, it sounds like if it cares too much, it's like the thing is that you may never see these people again.
That's right,
you're
exactly
never
right.
Play with,
it's a stranger.
Depending on the server, right? If you're on an EU server, you're never going to, unless you get to the challenger and above, then you're never going to play with them again. So be relaxed. Care about your own opinions, and try to work effectively with them, and be a good teammate. Don't be, one of our lessons that we got when we got dumped out of MSI in Brazil, we spoke with a really great coach who was super massive at the time. And one of the things we said, what do you look for in good players? And he said, at the very least neutral, but ideally positive. And that's what you ought to aim for. If you are going to, if I've misunderstood and it is just 4 strangers, then fair enough. But very least, so for your games, at very least, try to be neutral in your mindset, but ideally positive, and have a positive impact on teammates. And then back yourself. But back yourself based on the data.
Yeah, just to quickly add on to this one, 2 things. In terms of high confidence, I would say your confidence shouldn't come from just blindly, I'm just going to pull it out of my ass and I'm just going to be delusional and, I'm blindly just confident about how good I am. No, I think where confidence really is developed and where a lot of the work needs to be done to build confidence actually lies in your ability to learn. So, you can have the confidence knowing, okay, this is where I'm at now, but I'm confident that in a few months' time from now, I'm going to be better than what I was. And if you have that confidence, it's like, you have that confidence in your ability to learn, then the world's your oyster. For me, that's where my confidence stemmed from. I'm more confident now than I was when I was better when I was 18, 19. Even though comparative, if I were to contrast how good I was compared to everyone else on the server, I was better then, but less confident because I actually didn't know how to learn and get better. I got better just by playing, and maybe I was quite good naturally at the game, and I played games from a young age. But now I feel quite confident because I'm confident in my ability to get into the review and identify what goes wrong with my gameplay. So I would say confidence for me, and I would say for most people, in terms of long-term confidence comes from that ability to learn. And then the other thing in terms of developing confidence to make plays that are correct, that ties into make sure you're reviewing, like Jono said, reviewing what went well. Don't just review the mistakes. Review the things that you did well. Give yourself a pat on the back and recognize the small wins. Recognize the small victories. Because you're not going to go from 0 to faker. You're not going to go from 0 to doper. It's a gradual process. You've done, in this game you did one little thing right. You did that trade right. Or you did that. If Faker would have played this game, that's actually how he would have played that one trade. And the difference between you and Faker isn't your ability to do that one play, it's the consistency. Faker does it every single time. So give yourself a pat on the back when you do something along the way. Don't just look at the negatives.
And listening to Curtis' advice there, Wilderness. So look at why your judgment and why that was the right play and why you made that decision, right? So you not just was that right or wrong, but get into your working out, because it could also be that you 100% make a right decision, but you got outplayed, right? And that happens all the time, right? Is that it was exactly the right thing to do, but someone else was better.
All right, 2 more to go. How important is a nice short one? This is from Edward Tan. How important is physical health when trying to achieve mental happiness? It's a pretty broad, general question.
Well, I would say all things being equal, very important. Because if you're ill, then life sucks. It's very difficult to be happy when you're ill. I've got friends who have been ill for a long time and they've found happiness, but that's getting to the Zen side of life. But normally there's the real link with physical health and well-being and mental happiness. Now, esports and gaming is not sport; it's gaming, right? So you don't need to be an athlete, but you do need to be physically healthy. So just taking advice that your grandmother would give you, that's enough for most gamers. And also, if you're gonna play for more than 3 games at a time, absolutely 100% you must get up in between games and move about a bit, because the physical movement in the short term, that's the thing that determines just you get a bit sludgy. So that's also crucial, and it has a direct impact on your mental clarity and cognitive ability to focus and concentrate. So that's really helpful. The other thing to focus on is there's one thing that research around fitness and getting fitter is you've got to do something that you enjoy doing, right? If you try to get fit doing something that you hate doing, let's say that you don't like running, right? And now you're trying to run, unless you can convince yourself that running's good, the benefits of running won't come to you, because you'd be so miserable about having to go running. The cortisol and the negative hormones that come in from that hatred of running will outweigh the physical benefits. So if you're doing something and you're getting fitter and you don't enjoy it, keep looking and finding something that you would enjoy, and make sure you do that so that you get the emotional and mental benefits whilst you're doing the physical training. Or, like I said, like Curtis's mate, just giving himself a bite of, a really positive bite of chocolate, one piece of chocolate going to the gym. So he's already got a positive feeling. And that, if it's a nice bit of chocolate, that's going to have magnesium and other things in that. And it's going to give you a slight boost of dopamine. So it will get you into a nice positive state. And now it's anchored to that, then that will also help him do it as well.
I mean, for me, just quickly, going to the gym is less about the physical for me. It's about the mental effect, I would say. It makes me feel more energetic. But the main thing is just confidence. Not to please anyone else, not for anyone else, just for me. I just feel more confident I'm with my self-image. I feel like when I look in the mirror and I see myself, okay, I'm quite happy with the way I look. And that's not for anyone else, just for me. I just feel more confident, and that helps me, and it spreads through the rest of my life.
Feeling stronger is really important. And I think as well, just looking at a broader picture, just away from gaming for a moment, the COVID crisis for me has shown there are really big benefits to being physically healthy. Tremendous. Like the challenges that we're facing in the UK is we may have now a permanently impaired and challenged National Health Service, which means that we can't, the consequences of getting ill are going to be even greater going forward. which means that the benefits of being physically healthy are even greater than they've ever been. And that, I think, for all of us, it's really important that we're in great physical shape. But let's do it in a way that builds mental. But the feeling of being strong, the other thing from an athlete point of view, if you're a gamer, just being stronger will reduce the likelihood that you're going to get repetitive strain injuries. Just you going to the gym will make you more physically aware of your body. And then you'll say, if you are getting into a funny position when you're playing a game, you'll want to move more. And that then will reduce the chance of injuries. A lot of the Korean players I've played with have got very serious long-term physical injuries and impairments. And it's all down to they had the worst lifestyle as well. They were in really poor physical health.
All right, last one here is from Bluefrost. How do you keep yourself from getting impatient, and how do you accept that you ultimately can't control your teammates so you can stop blaming them or other external factors that don't have to do with yourself?
We kind of mentioned this one earlier on. This was the one I mentioned earlier on, but...
So do you know what? I would 100%, and so we've got those answers. The other thing I would focus on is recovery, Bluefrost. I would focus on how can I recover from when I become impatient, and how can I minimize the impact of when I do become impatient and maybe lash out at people or say stuff in chat that I shouldn't, that's unhelpful and unconstructive. The other thing is that the best players embrace reality better than everybody else, right? And they see what's possible and what isn't, where they're strong, where other people are weak, and when to make a trade and when not to. Right, so the whole thing about, it's really a test. This whole thing about your teammates is actually a test of are you ready for the next level, right? So there are things that are out of your control. And so can you accept that? Can you see the reality of the situation and then act as the agent, and you still push forward and try to write your own script and do everything you can to do that? And at the end of the day, you can then walk away and say, do you know what, that was a good day. I did a good job there.
Yep, and for me, it's that gladiator mindset that I spoke about in my last video about Doper. Doper's gladiator mindset, man. It's the way Doper views the game. He doesn't deserve a win, doesn't deserve a loss. It's just he's going in there, he's expressing his best self, and it just so happens if you do that enough, those players that have the mentality happen to be at the top of the leaderboard. Doper happens to get rank 1. And I think that I would, re-go back over that gladiator mindset. And even if you're not going to go from, again, you're not going to go from 0 to Doper. You're not going to have this perfect mentality overnight. But set yourself a challenge. Set yourself one small challenge. If I can play one game a day, if you're an extreme case, if I can play one game a day where I don't lash out at my teammates, or I don't blow things out of proportion, or even if I can play 10 minutes, if I can play the first 10 or 15 minutes of a game while staying coherent, that's a massive win for me. And if I play 8 games a day and I can play the first one or one of them with 10, 15 minutes of pure coherence, brilliant. Don't try to go from 0 to 100.
Do you know that there's one other thing for Bluefrost, really, if you're up for it, mate, is get a book called The Master Key. It's actually a correspondence course from like 100 years ago. It's by a guy called Charles, I think it's Haneel, H-A-N, I think E-E-L, something like that. But it's a master key. It was really famous back in the day. And one of the things he talks about is the program starts by sitting perfectly still in a room for 15 minutes every day for a week. And then you move on from that. But just, can you get control of your body? And it's tremendously difficult. And that would be a way, if you're really interested in cultivating patience, that would be a way of going for it. And the other thing, just to remember what Curtis was talking about, is the importance of having the strategic long-term view, is cultivating that and seeing that and working towards it. And I think that's one of the things that can really help with patience in the short term.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up. That's really helpful stuff. Really appreciate you taking the time, John. Hopefully you're not falling asleep right now.
Mate,
but I'm sure that was really helpful.
I pushed into the red on this one, mate. We're just coming up to midnight, so it's it's been great fun, boys. Let's do it again.
That was great stuff.
If you guys want, if I've got more questions come out after this one, then very happy to come on and do another one, and let's start the questions a bit sooner.
we
then
were
we
sidetracked a bit with the conversation.
And then we can make sure we answer all questions, right?
Yep.
And even if it's not in this session, then if there's any left over, then wing them over, or we'll do another one and jump on a call again. It's been great connecting again, boys.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Man. I really appreciate it, Jono, and hopefully we'll do this again soon. And that's it. Wrapping it up for episode 23.
Actually, quickly, Jono, any shout outs, anything you're working on, anything you want people to direct to?
No, do you know, I'm actually working on some online stuff, but it's all going to be in the new year. I'm just going long on that myself. But if someone wants to say hi on Twitter, I'm on. It's Jonasan Brown, Jona. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description.
Yeah.
And your DMs are open. Anyone can message you or anything, Jono?
They can, yeah. And I'm out of esports now and just back in work. And you might see me tweeting some grumpy stuff around COVID. But also, I'll be doing more stuff around performance in the weeks and months ahead.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. Long episode 23, Broken by Concept, and we will catch you next week.
All right. See you guys later, and thanks again, Jonathan.
You're very welcome, mate.